Hello everyone and welcome back. Before we begin, thank you so much for all your amazing comments and support. I'll be featuring some of your comments in future videos, so keep them coming. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes and 1,000 comments on this video. If you're enjoying it, please leave a like and say hello in the comments. Thank you, and let's get started. It was 1998, and I was on my way back from visiting a client in Northern Virginia. The meeting had run longer than expected, and dark clouds were already gathering on the horizon as I started my journey back to Maryland. I should have been home by evening if I stuck to the main highways, but traffic was at a standstill on I-95. Damn it, I muttered, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel as I stared at the sea of brake lights stretching endlessly before me. A tractor-trailer had jackknifed across 3 lanes, and emergency vehicles were creating a bottleneck that wouldn't clear for hours. I wasn't one for sitting in traffic. Never had been. My father always said I inherited his impatience, a trait that had gotten me into trouble more times than I could count. This time would be no exception. The GPS showed a network of rural routes that snake through the countryside. They looked like they would eventually reconnect with Highway 301, which would take me straight home. Impulsively, I took the next exit and headed east on a 2-lane road that quickly narrowed as it cut through dense Virginia woodland. At first, the detour seemed like a good decision. The road was empty and I made good time, even enjoying the scenery of rolling hills and autumn foliage. The GPS kept recalculating as I made turns at unmarked intersections, but I wasn't concerned. I'd find my way eventually. 2 hours later, as the sun began its descent behind the hills, casting long shadows across the increasingly neglected asphalt, doubt crept in. The roads had become narrower, more winding, with fewer signs and landmarks. Houses appeared less frequently, and those I did pass looked weathered and isolated, tucked behind overgrown fields and dilapidated fences. The dashboard GPS had given up entirely, showing only a blinking icon and the message "Signal lost." My phone showed no service bars. I checked the fuel gauge, the needle hovered just above empty, and the warning light had come on. Perfect, I said to no one, my voice sounding hollow in the quiet car. The trees pressed in on both sides of the road now, their branches creating a tunnel that seemed to swallow what little daylight remained. I hadn't seen another vehicle in at least an hour. The rational part of my brain suggested turning back, but pride and stubbornness pushed me forward. Surely there would be a town or gas station ahead. As if answering my thoughts, a sign appeared on the roadside. Time and weather had worn away most of the paint, leaving the metal rusted and barely legible. I slowed down to read it. Millview, 10 miles. An arrow pointed forward, down the increasingly neglected road. Something about the sign bothered me. Perhaps it was the way it leaned at an odd angle, as though partially pulled from the ground. Or maybe it was the crude, almost childlike lettering that had been repainted over the original text. Whatever it was, a sense of unease settled over me as I continued forward. The landscape changed subtly as I drove. The trees seemed older here, their trunks wider and their bark darker. Moss hung from branches like rotting curtains, and the underbrush appeared denser, more impenetrable. Even the air felt different. Heavier, with a musty scent that seeped through the car's air vents. My headlights caught the reflection of something in the road ahead. I slowed down, peering through the windshield at what appeared to be a small animal. As I approached, I realized it was a doll, an old-fashioned porcelain doll with a cracked face, missing one eye. It sat upright in the middle of the road, as if placed there deliberately. I swerved to avoid it, then checked my rearview mirror. In the fading red glow of my taillights, I could have sworn I saw a small hand reach out from the roadside undergrowth and pull the doll into the darkness. My heart began to pound harder. I pressed down on the accelerator, wanting to put distance between myself and whatever I'd just seen. The rational part of my brain insisted it was just a trick of the light. But the primal part, the part that recognizes danger before we consciously understand it, was screaming at me to turn around. But I couldn't turn around. The road had narrowed to the point where there was barely room for my car between the encroaching forest on either side, and with the fuel gauge now flirting with empty, I had no choice but to press on to Millview, hoping to find both civilization and gasoline. As the miles passed, abandoned structures began to appear among the trees. A collapsed barn, its roof caved in and walls rotting. An old silo, leaning precariously against the hillside, a single chimney standing alone. The house it once belonged to long since vanished. These silent sentinels watched my passage with hollow windows and doorframes that resembled faces frozen in silent screams. The pavement gradually gave way to gravel, then to hard-packed dirt. My car bounced and lurched over ruts and potholes, each one threatening to rupture my oil pan or break an axle. I slowed to a crawl, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. At last, the trees parted to reveal what must have been Millview. The faint glow of a few scattered lights in the distance gave me a momentary sense of relief, until I got close enough to see the town properly. Millview wasn't so much a town as a collection of decaying buildings arranged haphazardly along what might once have been a main street. Most of the structures were dark, their windows broken or boarded up. The few lights I'd seen came from bare bulbs hanging in porches or windows, their weak illumination creating more shadows than clarity. I rolled slowly into town, my headlights sweeping across abandoned storefronts with faded signs. A barber shop, a general store, a small post office. All appeared to have been closed for decades, their exteriors weathered and peeling. At the center of town stood what must have once been a courthouse or town hall, a two-story brick building with white columns and a small clock tower. The clock had stopped at 3:17, its face cracked and hands frozen in time. Beyond the town hall, I spotted what I'd been desperately seeking, a gas station. But as I pulled closer, my hope evaporated. The station was clearly abandoned, its pumps rusted relics from another era. The convenience store attached to it had windows broken and covered with years of grime. A faded sign reading "Closed" hung crookedly in the door. I stopped my car in front of the station anyway, turning off the engine to conserve what little fuel remained. The silence was immediate and absolute. No distant traffic noise, no hum of electricity, not even the chirp of insects or call of night birds. Just stillness, as if the town were holding its breath. I sat there for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts and suppress the rising panic. This place was wrong. Every instinct told me so. But I was stranded, out of options, and the sun had completely disappeared now, leaving only a starless night sky obscured by a thin layer of clouds. In the rearview mirror, I noticed a faint light from one of the houses further down the street. It was the only sign of habitation I'd seen, and despite my misgivings, it represented my only hope for assistance. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my wallet and phone and stepped out of the car. The air outside was denser than I expected, thick with the smell of damp earth, rotting wood, and something else. Something metallic and organic that I couldn't quite identify but that made my stomach clench. I walked toward the house with the light, the dirt road crunching softly beneath my shoes. Every few steps I tried my phone again, but the no service message remained stubbornly displayed. As I approached the house, a two-story Victorian with peeling white paint and a sagging porch, I noticed movement in one of the upstairs windows. A figure, briefly silhouetted against the dim light inside, before disappearing behind a tattered curtain. I paused at the bottom of the porch steps, suddenly questioning the wisdom of approaching strangers in this forgotten place. But what choice did I have? I needed help, and this house appeared to be the only inhabited building in Millview. Taking a deep breath, I climbed the creaking steps and approached the front door. I raised my hand to knock, but hesitated when I noticed something strange about the door itself. Small objects had been embedded into the wood, bones, what looked like animal teeth, and tiny metal trinkets. They formed a pattern that seemed almost like writing, though in no language I recognized. I swallowed hard and knocked anyway. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the quiet night. No answer came. I knocked again, harder this time. "Hello?" I called out. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my car's almost out of gas. I need help." Still nothing. I was about to turn away when I heard it. A soft scraping sound from inside, like something heavy being dragged across a wooden floor. Then footsteps, slow and uneven, approaching the door. The door opened a few inches, revealing darkness beyond. The door creaked wider, revealing two figures standing in the dim light of the hallway. My initial relief at finding someone, anyone, quickly turned to unease as I got a better look at them. The man stood tall but hunched, as if bearing an invisible weight on his shoulders. His skin was pallid, stretched tight over prominent bones, giving his face a skull-like appearance. Deep-set eyes regarded me with an unsettling intensity from beneath a heavy brow. His clothes, overalls and a flannel shirt, were stained with dark patches of what might have been mud, though the coppery smell suggested otherwise. His hands were caked with dirt, nails black with grime. Beside him stood a woman, short and stout, with stringy hair hanging in matted clumps that partially obscured her face. What I could see of her features was dominated by a smile, not the warm, welcoming expression of a potential helper, but something predatory and calculating. Her teeth were yellowed and uneven, some missing entirely, creating gaps in her grin that made it all the more disturbing. "Sorry to bother you," I repeated, fighting the urge to back away. "My car's almost out of gas, and I'm trying to get back to Maryland. Is there anywhere in town I can get fuel?" The pair remained silent for a moment, simply staring at me. Then the woman's grin widened further, revealing more of those crooked teeth. "Ain't no gas here," she said, her voice low and raspy, as if unused to speaking. "Not for many years now." "No gas station? Nothing at all?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The man shifted slightly, moving closer to the door. "Town's been empty a long time," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for someone of his stature. "Just a few of us left now. Is there a phone I could use? My cell doesn't have service here." The woman made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No phones. No need for 'em." She tilted her head, studying me with undisguised curiosity. "But you're welcome to come in. Rest a while." Every instinct screamed at me to decline and retreat. There was something fundamentally wrong about these people. Something that went beyond their unkempt appearance or strange manner of speaking. It was in their eyes, a hunger that had nothing to do with food. "I appreciate the offer, but I should try to find help," I said, taking a step backward. "Is there anyone else in town who might have gas, or a working vehicle?" The man and woman exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. "Ain't nobody can help you tonight," the man said. "Roads get tricky after dark. Bad things happen to folks who wander." "What kind of bad things?" I asked before I could stop myself. The woman's smile twitched. "People get lost, never find their way out again." She leaned forward slightly. "Best to wait till morning. Come inside, we don't bite." She paused, her smile growing impossibly wider. Much. I'm not sure if she meant it as a joke, but the way her companion's lips curled upward made my skin crawl. "Thank you, but I'll just wait in my car," I said firmly, taking another step back. "I appreciate your time." The man's expression hardened. "Suit yourself," he said, "but lock your doors." His eyes flicked to the wooded areas beyond the town. "They come out at night." Before I could ask who they were, the woman pulled the door shut, leaving me alone on the porch. I hurried back to my car, looking over my shoulder with every step. The darkness between houses seemed deeper now, the shadows more substantial. I could feel eyes watching me from windows, from alleys between buildings, from the tree line that encircled the town like a noose. Once inside my car, I locked all the doors and tried to calm my racing heart. The encounter had left me shaken, my mind filling with images of what those people might have done if I'd accepted their invitation. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. The car's fuel gauge showed empty now, the warning light glaring at me accusingly. I would have to spend the night here and hope to find help in the morning. Maybe another resident would be more normal, more helpful. Or perhaps I could walk to a neighboring town, though I had no idea how far that might be. As night fully descended on Millview, the darkness became absolute. No streetlights illuminated the roads, no porch lights or household lamps brightened windows. Even the house I'd just visited had gone dark, as if its occupants had suddenly vanished. I reclined my seat slightly and tried to get comfortable, though sleep seemed impossible in such circumstances. I kept my keys in the ignition, ready to start the car if necessary, though I knew the remaining fuel wouldn't take me far. Time passed with excruciating slowness. Each creak of the trees in the wind, each distant sound from the forest, set my nerves on edge. I found myself staring at the rearview mirror, watching for movement behind the car. Around midnight, according to my watch, since the car clock had inexplicably stopped working, I noticed a faint glow coming from the woods beyond the town. At first I thought it might be headlights from an approaching vehicle, but the quality of the light was wrong. It flickered and danced, like flames. Curiosity overcame caution, and I adjusted my position to get a better view. Deep among the trees, perhaps half a mile away, a fire burned. I could make out movement around it. Figures circling the flames, though they were too distant to see clearly. As I watched, wondering if these might be campers or hikers who could help me, my engine suddenly sputtered and died completely. The dashboard lights flickered once, then went out, plunging the car's interior into darkness. "No, no, no," I muttered, turning the key repeatedly. The engine made a weak grinding noise but wouldn't catch. After several attempts, even that sound faded, leaving only an ominous click when I turned the key. I sat in stunned silence. The battery had been fine. This was something else, something I couldn't explain or fix. I was truly stranded now. A soft tapping on the window beside me nearly stopped my heart. I whipped my head around to see a face pressed against the glass. A child's face, pale and gaunt, with eyes that reflected light like a cat's. The child, I couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl, stared at me without expression, then slowly raised a hand and beckoned. I fumbled for the door lock, making sure it was still engaged. "Go away," I shouted, my voice muffled by the window. The child continued to stare, unblinking. Then, without any change in expression, it placed both hands on the glass and began to push, as if testing the window's strength. I scrambled across to the passenger side, putting distance between myself and the child. From this new angle, I could see that the child wasn't alone. 4 or 5 more figures stood in the shadows behind it, adults of varying heights, all watching the car with the same unnerving stillness. The child continued pressing against the window, and to my horror, I heard the glass begin to creak under the pressure. How could a child exert such force? Making a split-second decision, I grabbed my wallet and phone, flung open the passenger door, and bolted from the car. I heard startled noises behind me as I sprinted down the town's main street, away from my car and the strange figures surrounding it. I ran blindly, my only thought to put distance between myself and those people. The road beneath my feet changed from dirt to cracked pavement, then to grass as I veered off into a field behind what looked like an abandoned diner. Only when my lungs burned for air did I stop, crouching behind a rusted dumpster to catch my breath. The night was silent again, no sounds of pursuit reaching my ears. Had I lost them, or were they simply waiting, knowing I had nowhere to go? I needed shelter, somewhere to hide until daylight. The diner behind me was an option, but it seemed too obvious. My eyes scanned the area, settling on a small building at the edge of the field. It looked like a storage shed or workshop, its weathered boards offering potential concealment. Staying low, I made my way toward it, freezing at every sound, the rustle of leaves, the creak of distant wood. The shed door hung partially open on rusted hinges. I slipped inside, pulling it closed behind me as quietly as possible. The interior was pitch black. I fumbled for my phone, activating its screen to provide a weak light. The shed contained farming equipment, ancient rusted tools hanging from pegs on the wall, bags of what might once have been fertilizer now hardened into unusable lumps, and a workbench covered in dust and cobwebs. In one corner sat an old generator, its metal casing corroded but potentially functional. Beside it, a shelf held several gas cans. I nearly sobbed with relief as I lifted one. It had weight to it, suggesting it contained fuel. If I could get this back to my car, I might be able to escape. But the thought of venturing outside again, of potentially encountering those people, made me hesitate. And what about the child? The unnatural strength it had displayed as it pressed against my window. I decided to wait until dawn. Surely in daylight the town would seem less threatening. Perhaps I'd even find a rational explanation for everything I'd experienced. Setting the gas can aside for later, I cleared a space in the corner furthest from the door and sat down, my back against the wall. I tried my phone again, still no signal. The battery was at 40%, and I knew I needed to conserve it. As I sat in the darkness, I became aware of sounds outside, soft footfalls in the grass, whispered conversations too faint to make out. They were searching for me. I drew my knees to my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible. The footsteps came closer, pausing just outside the shed. I held my breath, fear pulsing through me with each heartbeat. The door creaked open an inch, then another. A sliver of moonlight cut through the darkness, illuminating a single eye peering through the gap, an eye too large, too round to belong to a normal human face. I remained frozen, not daring to move or breathe. After what seemed like an eternity, the eye withdrew and the door eased shut again. The footsteps moved away, fading into the distance. Only then did I notice the smell, a pungent metallic odor that seemed to emanate from the back of the shed. My phone's light revealed what I'd missed in my initial inspection, a trapdoor in the floor, partially covered by an old tarp. Curiosity warred with fear. What lay beneath that door? A cellar? A tunnel that might lead out of town? Or something worse? In the end, necessity made the decision for me. If those people returned in greater numbers, I'd need another escape route. Slowly, I moved toward the trapdoor, pulling aside the tarp to reveal an iron ring handle set into rough wooden planks. Bracing myself, I pulled. The door resisted, then gave way with a groan that seemed impossibly loud in the silent shed. A rush of cold, dank air rose from the opening, carrying with it that metallic smell, now stronger and mixed with the unmistakable stench of decay. My phone's light revealed a set of crude steps descending into darkness. I hesitated at the threshold, every instinct warning me against proceeding. But the sound of returning footsteps outside the shed forced my hand. With one last glance at the gas can, which I now realized I wouldn't be able to carry while navigating unknown terrain in the dark, I began my descent into the earth beneath Millview. The steps led down into absolute darkness, each wooden plank groaning under my weight. The air grew colder and damper with every step, the smell of decay intensifying until I had to breathe through my mouth to avoid gagging. My phone's weak light barely penetrated the gloom, revealing only a few feet ahead at a time. After descending about 20 steps, I reached a dirt floor. The space opened into what appeared to be a tunnel, its walls supported by timber beams darkened with age and moisture. The ceiling was low enough that I had to stoop slightly to avoid hitting my head. I paused, listening for sounds of pursuit from above, but heard nothing beyond the soft drip of water somewhere in the darkness ahead. Taking a deep breath, I began moving forward, one hand trailing along the rough wall for guidance. The tunnel extended straight for about 50 feet before branching in two directions. I hesitated at the junction, uncertain which path to take. The left tunnel seemed to angle slightly upward while the right continued deeper underground. Hoping the rising path might lead to an exit, I turned left. As I progressed, I noticed that the timber supports gave way to stone walls. Not modern construction, but old masonry work with irregular blocks fitted together without mortar. The floor changed too, from packed earth to worn flagstones that felt unnaturally smooth beneath my shoes, as if polished by countless footsteps over many years. The tunnel widened into a chamber about the size of a small classroom. My phone's light couldn't reach the far wall, but it revealed enough to make me freeze in place. The room's floor was covered with small objects arranged in precise patterns. Bones, feathers, small animal skulls, and tarnished coins or medallions, all forming intricate spirals and geometric shapes that made my eyes hurt if I looked at them too long. At the center of the chamber stood a stone table or altar, its surface stained dark with what could only be blood, old and new layers overlapping in a horrific palimpsest of violence. Around the altar, candle stubs in various states of melting suggested recent use. My mouth went dry as the implication sank in. Whatever was happening in Millview went beyond rural isolation or eccentric locals. This was something ritualistic, something ancient and perverse. I began backing toward the tunnel entrance, unwilling to turn my back on the chamber. As I retreated, my foot knocked against something that rolled across the flagstones with a hollow sound. I lowered my phone's light to see what it was, and immediately regretted it. A human skull, smaller than an adult's, grinned up at me from the floor. A child's skull, with delicate bone structure and teeth still emerging from the jaw. I stifled a scream, turning to flee back the way I'd come. In my haste, I moved too quickly, striking my head on a low-hanging support beam. Pain exploded behind my eyes and I stumbled forward, losing my grip on my phone. It clattered to the ground, its light briefly illuminating the ceiling, revealing dozens of similar skulls embedded in the mortar between stones, empty eye sockets seeming to watch my panic. I scrambled to retrieve my phone, my fingers closing around it just as its screen went dark, either from impact damage or power-saving mode engaging. I jabbed desperately at the buttons, but the screen remained black. Darkness enveloped me completely. I stood frozen, disoriented, my heart pounding so loudly I feared it might echo through the tunnels and give away my position. Without light, I had no choice but to feel my way back, one cautious step at a time. I placed my hand on the wall and began moving, trying to retrace my path to the junction. Each step was an exercise in terror, my imagination populating the darkness with watching eyes and reaching hands. The sound of my own breathing seemed thunderous in the confined space. After what felt like an eternity, I reached the junction, or at least I thought it was the junction. Without light, I couldn't be certain. I turned right, hoping it would lead back to the stairs, but the tunnel seemed different. Wider, the ceiling higher than I remembered. I continued anyway, having no alternative. The floor began to slope downward, contradicting my memory of the path I'd taken. I should have been climbing back toward the trapdoor, not descending deeper. I was lost. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. I leaned against the wall, trying to control my breathing and think rationally. As I stood there, I became aware of a sound. Faint at first, then growing clearer, voices chanting in unison. The words unintelligible, but the rhythm hypnotic. The sound came from somewhere ahead. Logic told me to move in the opposite direction, but I found myself drawn forward, as if the chanting exerted a physical pull. I resisted for a moment, then surrendered to the compulsion, moving cautiously toward the source. The tunnel opened into another chamber, this one much larger than the first. Light spilled from its entrance, not the harsh glare of electric bulbs, but the warm, flickering illumination of dozens of candles and torches set in wall sconces. I approached the entrance and peered around the edge, careful to remain hidden in the shadows of the tunnel. What I saw defied rational explanation. The chamber was circular, its high domed ceiling lost in shadows. The walls were lined with niches, each containing what appeared to be mummified remains. Human figures with skin pulled tight over bones, preserved in postures of agony. Their hands reached outward, as if pleading for help that never came. In the center of the chamber stood a group of people. 20 or 30 individuals arranged in concentric circles around a central pit from which red light glowed with pulsing intensity. They wore simple clothes, similar to what I'd seen on the man and woman at the house, but adorned with bizarre accessories, necklaces of teeth and bone, headdresses made from animal skulls, and cloaks decorated with patches of what looked disturbingly like human skin. Among them I recognized the gaunt man and the woman with the unsettling grin. They stood in the innermost circle, closest to the pit. The woman held a curved knife that caught the firelight as she raised it above her head. The chanting grew louder, more frenzied. From my position, I couldn't see into the pit, but I could hear a sound rising from it. A wet, slithering noise punctuated by what might have been whimpers. I knew I should flee, should try to find another way out of the tunnels, but horror rooted me to the spot. I watched as the inner circle began to sway in unison, their movements becoming more erratic with each passing moment. Then the chanting stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so complete it seemed to have physical weight. The woman with the knife stepped forward to the edge of the pit, her back to me. She spoke words I couldn't understand, her voice carrying clearly in the silent chamber. From the pit came a response. Not words, but a sound so profoundly wrong that my mind refused to process it fully. It was like 1,000 voices speaking at once, some high and childlike, others deep and guttural, all overlapping in a symphony of madness. The assembled crowd prostrated themselves, foreheads touching the stone floor. Only the woman remained standing, her arms outstretched toward the pit. "We bring you another," she said, her voice now clear and carrying a note of reverence. "A stranger who wandered into our domain. An offering of fresh blood for the covenant." With dawning horror, I realized they were talking about me. Somehow they knew I was here, knew I was watching. But how? I'd been careful, silent in my approach. The answer came as I felt a hand close around my ankle. I looked down to see a figure crouching in the shadows beside me. The same childlike form I'd seen at my car window, its eyes reflecting the distant candlelight with an unnatural glow. It had followed me, tracked me through the darkness with senses I couldn't comprehend. I kicked out instinctively, my foot connecting with something that felt too soft, too yielding to be human bone. The creature, for I could no longer think of it as a child, made no sound, but its grip loosened enough for me to pull free. I turned and ran blindly into the tunnel, no longer caring about the noise I made. Behind me the chanting resumed, now with an urgency that suggested pursuit. I ran without direction, without thought, driven solely by the need to escape. The darkness was complete, but fear lent me a strange clarity. My hands found the walls, guiding me through turns and junctions I hadn't noticed before. I stumbled frequently, skinning my palms and knees on rough stone, but each time I pushed myself up and continued. After what seemed like hours but could only have been minutes, I saw it, a faint rectangle of lesser darkness ahead, a doorway or opening, different from the tunnels I'd been traversing. I sprinted toward it, hope giving me a final burst of speed. I emerged into open air, gulping it gratefully despite the same musty metallic odor that permeated everything in Millview. I was in some kind of yard or clearing, surrounded by dilapidated buildings. The moon had emerged from behind clouds, providing enough light to see my surroundings. I recognized one of the buildings, the abandoned gas station I'd seen when I first arrived in town. Somehow the tunnels had led me almost back to where I'd started. In the distance I could hear movement, multiple figures emerging from other openings in the ground, spreading out to search for me. They moved with purpose, with the confidence of predators on familiar hunting grounds. I needed shelter, a place to hide until daylight. The gas station seemed my best option. Familiar territory with multiple exits and potential weapons inside. I moved toward it, staying low and using the shadows for cover. As I neared the building, I saw something that made me pause. My car, parked exactly where I'd left it. But that was impossible. I'd abandoned it on the other side of town when fleeing from the child and the other figures. Unless I'd become disoriented in the tunnels, had traveled in a circle without realizing it. Or unless someone had moved my car, perhaps to lure me back. I approached cautiously, expecting an ambush. The driver's door stood partially open, keys still in the ignition. Beyond the car, the gas station's door hung open as well, darkness yawning within. I faced a choice: try to start the car and escape, or hide in the gas station until dawn. The car seemed the better option, but I remembered how the engine had died earlier, how the battery had failed for no apparent reason. What if the same thing happened again, leaving me exposed and vulnerable on the road? The decision was made for me as I heard voices approaching, too close to risk the time it would take to start the car. I ducked into the gas station, pulling the door nearly closed behind me but leaving it ajar enough to watch the street. The interior was pitch black, but my eyes were beginning to adjust after my time in the tunnels. I could make out the shapes of shelving units, a counter with an ancient cash register, and doorways leading to what might be storage areas or restrooms. I moved behind the counter, crouching down as footsteps approached outside. Through the gap in the door, I saw them. 5 or 6 figures moving slowly down the street, examining doorways and windows of each building they passed. They carried no flashlights, yet moved with certainty in the darkness, as if they could see perfectly. Leading them was the gaunt man from the house, now carrying what looked like a hunting rifle. Beside him walked the woman, her knife gleaming in the moonlight. The others were armed with various implements, axes, machetes, and in one case what appeared to be a bone saw. They paused in front of the gas station, and I held my breath, pressing myself against the counter to stay hidden. "The offering escaped the tunnels," the woman said, her raspy voice carrying clearly in the night air. "It can't have gone far." "The covenant requires blood," the man replied. "Fresh blood, freely flowing. We cannot return empty-handed. The town boundaries are sealed," another voice added. "It cannot leave without our permission." The woman turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across the buildings. For a terrifying moment, her eyes seemed to fix directly on the gap in the door, on my hiding place. Then she smiled, that same disturbing grin I'd seen earlier. "It hides," she said, thinking itself clever. "But we know this place. Every stone, every shadow." She gestured to the others. "Spread out. Find it. The sun rises in 3 hours, and the offering must be made before dawn." The group dispersed, moving in different directions. Two headed toward the woods, one crossed to the building opposite, and one remained on the street watching. The woman and the gaunt man approached my car, examining it closely. I watched as the woman ran her hand along the hood, then peered inside through the open door. She reached in and removed the keys from the ignition, slipping them into her pocket with a satisfied nod. "It will return for this," she said. "They always try to escape." The man grunted in agreement. Then both moved away, heading toward the edge of town opposite from where I'd seen the fire earlier. I remained motionless behind the counter, my mind racing. They had my keys now, eliminating any chance of driving away. I was trapped in Millview, at least until I could find another way out. As I considered my options, a soft sound from behind me froze the blood in my veins. The quiet scrape of something moving in the darkness at the back of the store. I wasn't alone. I turned slowly toward the source of the sound, every muscle tense with fear. In the dim light filtering through the dirty windows, I could just make out a shape moving behind the shelves at the back of the store, something low to the ground, advancing with deliberate caution. My hand groped blindly along the counter, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon. My fingers closed around something cold and metallic, a tire iron perhaps left behind when the station was abandoned. The shape paused, as if sensing my movement. For several heartbeats, we remained frozen in mutual awareness, neither making a sound. Then it emerged from behind the shelves, and I had to stifle a gasp. It was a dog, a large, emaciated hound with patchy fur and visible ribs. But as it moved closer, I realized this was no ordinary canine. Its proportions were wrong. Legs too long and joints that seemed to bend in unnatural directions. Its head was hairless, skull-like, with ears that lay flat against the bone. And its eyes, two milky orbs that nonetheless seemed to fix on me with terrible awareness. The creature tilted its head, studying me with those blind-looking eyes. Then, to my shock, it whined softly, not threatening but almost plaintive. I remained still, tire iron raised defensively. The dog thing made no move to attack, instead sitting back on its haunches about 10 feet away, continuing to regard me with that unsettling gaze. After several moments of this strange standoff, it did something even more unexpected. It turned its head toward the store's back wall, then back to me, repeating the gesture with clear intent. It wanted me to follow. Every rational thought warned against trusting this aberration, this thing that couldn't possibly be natural. And yet it hadn't attacked when it had the chance. It seemed to be offering help. Before I could decide, voices outside grew louder. Someone was approaching the gas station again. The dog thing's head snapped toward the sound, a low growl emanating from its throat. It looked back at me, more insistent now, again indicating the store's rear. Decision time. I could stay and face whoever was coming, or I could follow this unnatural creature to who knew where. Neither option seemed particularly safe, but at least the dog wasn't actively trying to kill me. Yet, I moved quietly from behind the counter, staying low. The dog thing immediately stood and padded toward the back of the store, pausing to ensure I followed. It led me to a door marked "Employees Only," nudging it open with its snout to reveal a small storeroom beyond. The room contained shelves of ancient inventory, canned goods with faded labels, dusty bottles of motor oil, boxes of unused paper products. At the far end, the dog scratched at a section of the wall that upon closer inspection turned out to be another door, this one hidden by its identical paint color to the surrounding wall. I pushed it open to find a narrow staircase leading down. More tunnels. The thought of returning underground filled me with dread, but the sound of the gas station's front door opening made the decision for me. I slipped through the hidden door, the dog thing following close behind. I pulled the door shut just as flashlight beams swept the storeroom. Voices filtered through. Two people, speaking in the same strange cadence I'd heard during the ritual. "It was here," one said. "I can smell it." "Not long gone," the other replied. "The scent is fresh." They moved around the storeroom, their footsteps heavy on the wooden floor above my head. I held my breath, the tire iron clutched in white-knuckled hands as I pressed myself against the wall of the stairwell. The dog thing had no such concerns. It continued down the stairs without waiting, disappearing into the darkness below. With no better options, I followed, feeling my way down step by step until I reached what felt like a wine cellar. cool and dry, with earthy-smelling air. The dog had stopped at the bottom of the stairs, its outline barely visible in the near-total darkness. It waited until I reached it, then moved forward again, leading me through rows of shelving that seemed to contain bottles and jars. We progressed through the cellar and into another tunnel, this one different from those I'd traversed earlier. The walls were smooth concrete rather than stone, suggesting more recent construction. Pipes ran along the ceiling, perhaps part of the town's water system or other utilities. The dog moved with confident familiarity, never hesitating at junctions or turns. I followed blindly, having no choice but to trust this bizarre guide. The darkness was so complete that I frequently bumped into walls or tripped over uneven flooring, but the sound of the dog's claws on concrete kept me oriented. After what seemed like an hour of walking, though my rattled sense of time made it impossible to judge accurately, I detected a change in the air. It became fresher, carrying hints of pine and damp earth. We were heading toward an exit. Sure enough, the tunnel began to slope upward, and ahead I could see the faintest lightening of the darkness. Not daylight, but perhaps moonlight filtering through trees. The dog increased its pace, and I hurried to keep up. We emerged in a small clearing in the woods, the exit concealed by thick undergrowth that had been pushed aside to allow passage. The night sky was visible through gaps in the canopy, stars now clearly visible as the clouds had dispersed. The dog stopped at the edge of the clearing, turning to face me. In the moonlight, it looked even more unnatural, less like a dog and more like something that had once seen a dog and attempted to recreate the form without fully understanding its anatomy. It made no sound, but its intent was clear. This was as far as it would take me. I had been delivered from immediate danger, but what happened next was my responsibility. "Thank you," I said, feeling ridiculous for speaking to the creature but compelled to acknowledge its help. The dog thing's milky eyes regarded me for a moment longer. Then it turned and melted into the underbrush, disappearing as silently as it had appeared in the gas station. Alone again, I took stock of my situation. I was somewhere in the woods outside Millview, with no clear idea of which direction might lead to safety. My car keys were gone, my phone was dead, and dawn was still hours away, but at least I was away from those people and their disturbing ritual. I had a weapon of sorts in the tire iron, and the cover of darkness in which to put distance between myself and the town. I looked up at the stars, trying to orient myself. The North Star was visible, which meant I could establish direction. Maryland lay northeast of Virginia. If I could maintain that heading until reaching a road or another town, I might find help. I began walking, staying beneath the cover of trees but keeping the stars visible for navigation. The forest was unnervingly quiet. No insects chirping, no night birds calling, not even the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. It was as if all natural life had abandoned this area, leaving only silence and the occasional whisper of wind through leaves. After about 20 minutes of hiking, I noticed light ahead, not the diffuse glow of dawn, but the focused illumination of flames. The fire I'd glimpsed earlier from town. Caution warred with curiosity. The fire might represent danger, more of the townspeople and their rituals, but it could also be campers or hunters, normal people who might help me. I approached slowly, using trees for cover. As I drew closer, details became clearer, extinguishing any hope of finding friendly assistance. In a clearing about 50 yards ahead stood a circle of rough-hewn wooden posts, each topped with an animal skull, deer, bear, and others I couldn't identify. Within this circle burned a massive bonfire, its flames reaching 15 feet into the air, casting wild shadows across the surrounding trees. Around the fire moved figures, 6 or 7 people dressed in the same makeshift ceremonial garb I'd seen in the underground chamber. They danced in a slow, shuffling circle, their movements suggesting exhaustion or trance, but what froze my blood was what hung from a thick branch extending over the fire pit. Bodies, at least 3 of them, suspended by ropes around their ankles. From my position, I couldn't tell if they were animal carcasses or human remains, but given everything I'd seen in Millview, I feared the worst. I began to back away, moving as silently as possible. Whatever was happening here, I wanted no part of it. But as I retreated, my foot came down on a dry branch, snapping it with a crack that seemed explosively loud in the quiet forest. The dancing figures stopped abruptly, heads turning in unison toward the sound. One of them, a tall, thin man with what appeared to be a deer skull covering his head, raised a hand and pointed directly at my hiding place. "There," he shouted. "The offering flees." I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, crashing through underbrush and leaping over fallen logs with adrenaline-fueled desperation. Behind me came sounds of pursuit, branches breaking, voices calling to each other as they spread out to cut off possible escape routes. I had no plan beyond putting distance between myself and my pursuers. The tire iron slapped against my leg as I ran, temporarily forgotten in the panic of flight. The forest seemed to close in around me, branches reaching like grasping hands to slow my progress, roots rising from the earth to trip my feet. A shout from my right indicated that one of them was gaining ground, attempting to flank me. I veered left, only to hear another voice from that direction. They were surrounding me, using their knowledge of the terrain to herd me like prey. Ahead, the trees thinned, revealing what appeared to be a road or wide path. I sprinted toward it, hoping it might lead to safety. As I burst from the tree line, moonlight revealed a dirt track wide enough for vehicles, perhaps a fire road or access path for the forestry service. I turned right without thinking, running along the packed earth that offered easier footing than the forest floor. Behind me, figures emerged from the trees, giving chase with tireless determination. The road curved ahead, revealing a structure in the distance, a small building with a metal roof reflecting moonlight. As I drew closer, I recognized it as a ranger station or fire lookout, the kind of remote outpost that might have a radio or other means of communication. Hope surged within me. If I could reach it, barricade myself inside, perhaps I could call for help or at least find better weapons than a tire iron. I redoubled my speed, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the cramping in my legs. Behind me, my pursuers seemed to realize my destination and likewise increased their pace, their calls taking on a more urgent tone. The station stood on a slight rise, a single window illuminated by what might have been emergency lighting or a security lamp. A set of wooden steps led to a door that represented my only chance of safety. I took the steps 3 at a time, grasping the door handle and twisting with desperate strength. To my immense relief, it turned freely and I flung myself inside, slamming the door behind me and searching frantically for a lock. There was none, just a simple latch that wouldn't hold against determined force. I looked around wildly for something to barricade the door and spotted a heavy desk that might serve. With strength born of fear, I dragged it across the floor and wedged it against the entrance. Only then did I take in my surroundings and the horror of my mistake. This was no ranger station. The interior walls were covered with symbols carved directly into the wood, the same spiral patterns and angular glyphs I'd seen in the underground chamber. What I'd taken for a desk was actually an altar, its surface stained dark with old blood. And I wasn't alone. Seated in a corner, nearly invisible in the shadows, was the woman with the disturbing grin, the same one who had taken my car keys, who had presided over the ritual beneath the town. She regarded me with that same predatory smile, her eyes reflecting the faint light like an animal's. "We wondered when you'd find your way here," she said, her raspy voice edged with amusement. "They always do in the end." I raised the tire iron defensively, backing toward the window, the only other exit from this nightmarish trap. "Stay away from me," I warned, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman made no move to approach. She simply sat there, watching me with unsettling intensity. "You can't leave," she said matter-of-factly. "The boundaries won't permit it, not until the covenant is satisfied." "What covenant?" I demanded, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "What is this place?" She tilted her head, studying me as if I were a curious specimen. "Millview has always been here," she said. "Long before it had that name. Long before there were roads or maps or people who believed they understood the world." Her smile widened. "We keep the old ways. We remember what others have forgotten." Outside, voices grew louder as my pursuers reached the building. I heard them gathering around the door, speaking in that strange language I couldn't understand. "What do you want from me?" I asked, edging closer to the window. "Want?" She laughed, a dry sound like autumn leaves rustling. "We don't want anything from you. It's what the town wants, what it needs." She gestured toward the symbols on the walls. "The covenant must be renewed with each cycle. blood freely given or taken by force. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it, the desk sliding a few inches across the floor. It wouldn't hold for long. I abandoned any pretense of bravery and turned to the window, using the tire iron to smash the glass. Cool night air rushed in as I cleared the frame of jagged shards. "You can run," the woman said behind me, her voice now impossibly close though I hadn't heard her move. "But you'll only find your way back here. The town doesn't release what belongs to it." Another impact shook the door, the desk moving further. Through the gap I could see hands reaching in, pushing against the barricade. With no other options, I climbed through the window, dropping to the ground outside. To my surprise, none of the figures surrounding the building moved to intercept me. They watched with eerie stillness as I backed away, tire iron still clutched in my hand. "Dawn comes soon," one of them called, the gaunt man I'd met at the house. "The offering must be made before the sun rises." I turned and ran once more, heading back toward the dirt road. No one followed immediately, their confidence in my inevitable return apparently absolute. The eastern sky had begun to lighten almost imperceptibly, the first hint of approaching dawn. If I could just hold out until daylight, perhaps the rules of this nightmare would change. Perhaps the covenant the woman spoke of had limitations tied to darkness. I followed the dirt road, hoping it would lead away from Millview and toward civilization. But as the sky continued to brighten, I saw with sinking heart that the road curved back toward the town, emerging from the forest at a point not far from where I'd first entered. I stopped, staring in disbelief at the collection of decrepit buildings now visible in the pre-dawn light. Somehow, despite running in what I'd thought was the opposite direction, I'd circled back to Millview. Was it possible I'd become so disoriented that I'd traveled in a circle? Or was something more sinister at work? Some property of the land itself that prevented escape, as the woman had claimed. With daylight approaching, I decided to try once more. I turned away from the town and headed back into the forest, this time ignoring roads and paths, using the steadily brightening sky to maintain a straight course away from Millview. I walked for what must have been an hour, pushing through increasingly dense undergrowth, climbing over fallen trees and skirting boggy areas where the ground grew soft and treacherous. The forest should have ended, should have given way to fields or highways or other signs of the Virginia countryside I knew existed beyond Millview. Instead, the trees began to thin, revealing familiar buildings ahead. The abandoned courthouse, the shuttered general store, the gas station where my car still waited. Millview? Again, I stopped, exhaustion and despair washing over me in equal measure. The woman's words echoed in my mind. The town doesn't release what belongs to it. As the first true rays of sunlight crested the eastern hills, I made my way to my car, not bothering to hide or move stealthily. The town seemed deserted now, no sign of the strange residents or their horrific rituals. The car door was still open, though the keys were gone as I'd expected. I collapsed into the driver's seat, mind racing for solutions. Could I hotwire the car, find another vehicle? Perhaps in daylight I could simply walk out of town along the main road, the one I'd driven in on. As I sat there, contemplating my next move, I noticed something on the passenger seat that hadn't been there before, a folded piece of paper. I picked it up cautiously, unfolding it to reveal a hand-drawn map. It showed Millview at the center, surrounded by forest, with a single road leading away to the south. Not the direction I'd come from originally, nor any of the ways I'd tried to leave. At the bottom of the page, written in spidery script, were the words, "The covenant accepts substitution. Bring another, and you may leave." The implications turned my stomach. They wanted me to lure someone else to Millview, to condemn another innocent to whatever fate awaited offerings in this nightmarish place. I crumpled the paper and threw it aside. There had to be another way out. One that didn't involve becoming like them. As the sun climbed higher, bringing full daylight to Millview, I noticed movement at the edge of town, a pickup truck approaching slowly along the main road. My heart leapt. Someone from outside? Someone who might help me escape. I got out of my car and stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms frantically to flag down the approaching vehicle. The pickup truck slowed as it approached, its engine rattling with age. It was an old Ford, probably from the 1970s. Its once blue paint faded to a mottled gray. The driver, A middle-aged man with graying temples and a weathered face regarded me with undisguised concern. I must have been a sight. Clothes torn and dirt-smeared, eyes wild from a night of terror, still clutching a rusty tire iron in one hand. The truck rolled to a stop about 20 feet from where I stood. The driver rolled down his window but made no move to get out. "You all right?" he called, his voice carrying the soft drawl of rural Virginia. His eyes moved from me to the abandoned buildings of Millview, then back to me, weariness evident in his expression. "No," I said, my voice cracking with exhaustion and relief at seeing another human being. A normal one, not part of whatever nightmare inhabited this town. "My car broke down, and I've been stuck here all night. Can you help me? I just need a ride to the nearest town with a phone." The man frowned, his gaze again sweeping the empty street behind me. "This place has been abandoned for years," he said. "Not safe to be wandering around here. Buildings liable to collapse, among other things." "I know," I said, taking a step toward the truck. "Please, I just need to get out of here." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Hop in. I'm heading to Glenville, about 20 miles south. You can call for help from there." 20 miles. The distance seemed impossible. Had I really wandered so far from civilization? But it explained why no one had intervened in whatever was happening in Millview. The town was truly isolated, forgotten by the modern world. I moved toward the passenger side of the truck, relief making my legs weak. As I reached for the door handle, movement in my peripheral vision made me freeze. They were emerging from the buildings, from doorways and alleys and shadowed porches. The residents of Millview, dozens of them, moving with the same unhurried purpose I'd witnessed during the night. The gaunt man, the woman with the disturbing grin, the child thing with reflective eyes, others I hadn't seen before, all bearing the same look of patient anticipation. "What the hell?" the driver muttered, noticing them too. His hand moved to the gear shift, ready to accelerate away. "Drive," I urged, yanking open the door and scrambling inside. "Now!" You didn't need to be told twice. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning on the dirt road as he hit the gas. We sped through the town center, passing buildings on either side from which more figures emerged, watching our passage with unnerving calm. "What's wrong with those people?" the driver asked, knuckles white on the steering wheel as he navigated the deteriorating road. "Some kind of commune or cult?" I didn't answer immediately, focusing instead on the road ahead. We were approaching the town limits, passing the rusted sign I'd seen when I first arrived. Beyond it lay the forest, and beyond that, freedom. "Something like that," I said finally. "They tried to keep me here, wouldn't let me leave." He shot me a skeptical glance. "What? They held you prisoner?" How could I explain what I'd witnessed? The rituals, the tunnels beneath the town, the inexplicable way the roads had led me back no matter which direction I fled. He would think I was insane. "Sort of," I said. "Look, I just want to get as far from here as possible." He nodded, focusing on the road again. We had entered the forest now, trees pressing close on either side of the narrow lane. The truck bounced over ruts and potholes, its aged suspension groaning in protest. I watched the side mirror, half expecting to see the townspeople in pursuit. But the road behind us remained empty. Had we escaped? Was it really that simple? Just driving away in broad daylight? The woman's words echoed in my mind. "The covenant accepts substitution. Bring another and you may leave." I hadn't brought the driver to Millview intentionally. But he was here now. Another potential offering for whatever dark purpose the town required. The thought made me sick with guilt. "We should go faster," I said, unable to shake the feeling that we weren't yet free. The driver gave me another look, his expression now more concerned than before. "Road's too rough. Bust an axle out here and we're both stuck." I nodded reluctantly, acknowledging the truth in his words. But with each passing minute, dread built within me. It couldn't be this easy. Nothing about Millview had been easy. We had traveled perhaps 3 miles from the town when the engine coughed, then sputtered. The driver's eyes widened as he pumped the gas pedal, trying to maintain speed. "What's happening?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "Don't know," he said, brow furrowed in confusion. "She was running fine this morning. Filled the tank before I left home. The engine coughed again, then died completely." The truck rolled forward on momentum for another 100 yards before slowing to a stop in the middle of the road. The driver tried the ignition repeatedly, but the engine wouldn't catch, just like my car the night before. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the tick of the cooling engine and the distant call of a crow somewhere in the forest. "This isn't mechanical," I said quietly. "It's them. The town. It doesn't want us to leave." The driver stared at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and growing fear. "What are you talking about?" Before I could answer, movement appeared in the road ahead, figures emerging from the trees blocking our path. The residents of Millview had somehow gotten ahead of us, anticipating our route and laying an ambush. "Jesus Christ," the driver breathed, reaching beneath his seat and pulling out a revolver. "What the hell is going on here?" I remembered my initial encounter with the gaunt man and the woman, how they had invited me inside, how every instinct had warned me against accepting. Now I understood why. Once you entered their domain, you became part of their covenant, an offering. "We need to run," I said, gripping the tire iron tightly. "The truck's not going to start again. We need to go on foot, through the woods." The driver nodded, his face pale but determined. He checked his revolver, an old .38 Special that had seen better days, and opened his door. "Stay close," he said. "I grew up hunting these woods. I know the area." We left the truck, moving quickly into the forest perpendicular to the road. The undergrowth was thick, making progress difficult, but the driver seemed to know what he was doing, finding game trails and natural gaps in the vegetation. Behind us I could hear movement, the townspeople pursuing, spreading out to flank us just as they had during the night. But in daylight, navigating with the help of someone who knew the terrain, we stood a better chance. We pushed deeper into the forest, maintaining a steady pace that gradually put distance between us and our pursuers. The driver led the way confidently, occasionally checking his bearings against the sun's position. "There's a fire road about a mile ahead," he said quietly as we paused to catch our breath behind a fallen oak. "It leads to the county highway. If we can reach that, we're in the clear." I nodded, trying to ignore the doubt gnawing at me. The woman's certainty that I couldn't escape nagged at my thoughts. What if the fire road simply led us back to Millview, like every escape route I'd tried during the night? But I had no better plan. And the driver's confidence was reassuring. He knew these woods, had hunted here for years. Surely his knowledge would prove more reliable than my panicked flight in darkness. We continued on, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind us. The forest began to thin slightly, the trees smaller and more widely spaced, suggesting we were approaching its edge. "Almost there," the driver said, pointing ahead. "See that break in the trees? That's the fire road." Hope surged within me as I caught sight of what was indeed a wide dirt track cutting through the forest. Beyond it, the land opened up into fields, normal, cultivated farmland that represented civilization and safety. We hurried forward, less concerned now with silence than with speed. The fire road was within reach, 50 yards, then 30, then just a few steps ahead. As we burst from the tree line onto the dirt track, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had done it. We had escaped Millview and its horrible inhabitants. The driver smiled, tucking his revolver into his waistband as he surveyed the open country beyond the road. "See? Told you I knew these woods. Another mile that way." He pointed north along the fire road. "And we hit Route 29. Plenty of traffic there, someone will give us a lift." I nodded, relief making me lightheaded. "Thank you," I said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." His smile faded slightly, a shadow passing across his features. "What did happen back there? What were those people after?" I hesitated, unsure how much to tell him. Would he believe the truth? That Millview was somehow both abandoned and inhabited? That its residents practiced rituals involving human sacrifice? That the town itself seemed to prevent escape? "It's complicated," I began. "They're not right. They wanted me for some kind of ritual, called me an offering." The driver's eyebrows rose, but he didn't dismiss my words outright. "Cults out in these backwoods aren't unheard of," he said thoughtfully. "Isolated communities that go bad, start believing weird things. We should report them when we get to Glenville." I nodded, though I doubted any conventional authorities would be able to handle what dwelled in Millview. But that was a problem for later. For now, we needed to reach safety. We started walking along the fire road, the open sky above a welcome change from the claustrophobic forest canopy. The sun was high now, approaching midday, its warmth chasing away the lingering chill of my night in the tunnels. After about 10 minutes of walking, a sound reached us, the distant rumble of an engine. We both stopped, looking back the way we had come. Had the townspeople somehow gotten their vehicles working when ours had failed? But the sound came from ahead, from the direction of Route 29. A vehicle was approaching along the fire road. A pickup truck similar to the one we'd abandoned, though newer and in better condition. Probably a hunter or park ranger, the driver said. They use these roads to access the backcountry. We moved to the side of the road, waving as the truck approached. It slowed, the driver, a younger man with a beard and baseball cap, regarding us curiously. "You folks need help," he called through his open window. "Car trouble?" my companion explained. "Could you give us a lift to Glenville?" The man in the truck hesitated, then nodded. "Hop in the back, I'm heading that way anyhow." Relief washed over me again as we climbed into the truck bed. The vehicle resumed its journey, carrying us further from Millview with each passing moment. I leaned against the cab, closing my eyes briefly as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. When I opened them again, the landscape had changed. We were passing through farmland now, fields of corn and soybeans stretching to the horizon. Normal, ordinary, safe. "We made it," I said, my voice barely audible over the road noise. The driver nodded, his own relief evident in the relaxation of his features. "Gonna have to send a tow truck back for my pickup," he said, though I'm half tempted to just leave it there. I understood the sentiment. Anything connected to Millview seemed tainted, corrupted by whatever malevolence pervaded that place. The truck eventually turned onto a paved road, Route 29 presumably, and shortly thereafter we entered the outskirts of what must have been Glenville. It was a small town but beautifully normal. Gas stations with functioning pumps, a diner with customers visible through its windows, houses with cars in driveways and children playing in yards. Our benefactor dropped us at a gas station with an attached convenience store. As he drove away, I felt the last of my tension begin to ebb. We were safe. We had escaped. The driver, whose name I learned was Michael, used the payphone to call for a tow truck for his pickup. He also contacted the county sheriff's office, reporting what little I was willing to tell him about Millview and its residents. "They'll send someone to check it out," he told me after hanging up. Though the deputy I spoke to didn't seem too concerned. Said Millview's been abandoned since the 70s when the paper mill closed. Official records show no residents for decades. I nodded, unsurprised. Whatever lived in Millview existed outside normal society, perhaps outside normal reality itself. Official records would never capture the truth of what happened there. Michael offered to drive me to the nearest bus station once his truck was recovered. I thanked him profusely, still feeling a nagging guilt that I had inadvertently drawn him into danger by flagging him down in Millview. While waiting for the tow truck, we sat at a picnic table outside the convenience store, drinking coffee and trying to process what had happened. Michael seemed content not to press me for details, accepting my vague explanations about a cult or commune with dangerous practices. I was midway through a sentence when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. A familiar figure walking down the street toward us. The woman with the disturbing grin, her clothes now cleaner and more modern than what she'd worn in Millview, but her face unmistakable. She shouldn't have been able to reach Glenville before us, not on foot. Yet here she was, walking casually past shops and pedestrians who seemed not to notice anything unusual about her. Our eyes met across the distance, and her grin widened. She raised a hand in what might have appeared to others as a friendly wave, but which I recognized as a reminder. A message that I wasn't as free as I believed. "What's wrong?" Michael asked, noticing my sudden tension. I tore my gaze away from the woman, who had continued walking and now disappeared around a corner. "Nothing," I lied, "just tired." But I knew then that it wasn't over. Whatever covenant bound Millview and its inhabitants hadn't released me. Perhaps it never would. The tow truck arrived an hour later, its driver reporting that they'd been unable to locate Michael's pickup at the coordinates he'd provided. The fire road existed, but there was no vehicle abandoned on it or anywhere in the vicinity. Michael was confused and frustrated, but I wasn't surprised. The truck had served its purpose, bringing another potential offering to Millview. Now it had vanished, just like all traces of normality seemed to do in that cursed place. True to his word, Michael arranged for me to reach the bus station in the next town over. Before we parted, he pressed his card into my hand. He was a contractor, his business information printed alongside his personal number. "If you ever need anything," he said, "or if those people cause you more trouble, call me." What happened out there? It wasn't right. I thanked him, knowing I would never make that call. I wouldn't risk drawing him back into Millview's orbit. He had escaped once. Tempting fate a second time would be unconscionable. The bus took me back to Maryland, to my apartment and my normal life. I reported my car stolen, collected the insurance, and tried to move on. I told no one the full story of what happened in Millview. Who would believe me? But I knew I hadn't escaped. Not really. Sometimes in crowds I catch glimpses of them. The gaunt man browsing in a bookstore, the child thing watching from a playground, the woman with the grin passing me on the street. They never approach, never speak. They simply remind me of their presence, of the covenant that still binds me. And sometimes, when I'm driving unfamiliar roads, I notice signs for towns I've never heard of, exits that don't appear on any map. I drive past them now, no matter how bad the traffic, no matter how tempting the shortcut, because I know the truth that most people never learn. Some places aren't meant to be found. Some towns don't appear on maps for a reason. And once you've entered their domain, you never truly leave. You simply extend the boundaries of your prison. Millview is waiting. It has been patient for decades, perhaps centuries. It can wait a little longer for me to fulfill my part of the covenant, but I never will. No matter how many times I see them watching me, no matter how many nightmares plague my sleep, I will never bring another innocent to that place. Some prices are too high, even for freedom, and so we remain in stalemate. Me, trying to build a life despite knowing what lurks at its edges, and them, waiting for me to fulfill a bargain I never agreed to but am bound by nonetheless. The covenant remains unsatisfied, and somewhere in the forgotten backwoods of Virginia, Millview waits for its offering to return. The dream came again last night, the same as it has for weeks now. I'm standing in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, their uppermost branches lost in mist. A sense of being watched prickles at my neck. When I turn, there's nothing there, just endless forest stretching in every direction. But I know I'm not alone. I wake with a start, the morning light filtering through my bedroom window. My name is Inoli Adair, and I come from an ancient Cherokee bloodline that has walked these mountains for centuries. My grandfather named me Inoli, Black Fox in Cherokee, saying I had the keen senses and quiet wisdom of the creature. The name felt like both a blessing and a burden. The cabin creaks around me as I rise, my joints protesting after 15 years of hiking these trails as a park ranger in the Cherokee National Forest. This place is in my blood. My ancestors walked these same paths, knew these same trees. Sometimes I swear I can hear their whispers in the wind that passes through the pines. My phone buzzes. It's Mike, the head ranger. "Anoli, we've got a situation. Hikers missing since yesterday afternoon. Family of 3, parents and a 10-year-old girl. They were supposed to camp at Bald River Falls and check in with the office this morning." My stomach tightens. Missing hikers are never good, but when there's a child involved, the stakes feel higher, the urgency more acute. "I'll gear up and head to the trailhead," I tell him, already reaching for my uniform. Watauga search team is assembling now. State police are sending a helicopter, but there's fog rolling in. Not sure how much help there'll be. I glance out the window. Sure enough, tendrils of mist are snaking through the valley below. "I'll take the Eastern Ridge Trail. It gives a good vantage point of the falls area." "Thanks, Inoli. If anyone can find them, it's you. If anyone can find them, it's you." He doesn't know how true that is. My grandfather, before he passed, told me our family has always been the ones who find what is lost. "It's in our blood," he said. "The mountains speak to us if we know how to listen." I dress quickly in my ranger uniform, the familiar weight of the badge a comfort. Then I gather my emergency pack. First aid supplies, extra water, emergency blankets, flares, flashlight, radio. As I'm checking my equipment, My eyes fall on the small leather pouch hanging near the door. It contains sacred herbs and a small carved wooden fox, my grandfather's parting gift before he walked into the spirit world 5 years ago. For protection, he'd said, pressing it into my palm. The forest holds old spirits. Some are friendly to our people. Others are not. I hesitate, then grab the pouch and tuck it into my pocket. In the Cherokee way, we respect the unseen. We know better than to dismiss what we don't understand. The drive to the trailhead takes 30 minutes, winding mountain roads that I know by heart. The fog grows thicker as I ascend, transforming the familiar landscape into something otherworldly. By the time I reach the ranger station near Bald River Falls, visibility is down to about 50 feet. Mike is already there with 4 other rangers and 2 volunteer search and rescue workers. A state police officer stands nearby, looking uncomfortable in the wilderness setting. Helicopters grounded until this fog lifts, Mike says by way of greeting. We've got the family's vehicle in the overnight lot. Their trail permit says they were planning to hike to the upper falls and camp at Site 14. I nod, studying the map spread across the hood of Mike's truck. Any sign of them on the main trail? Nothing yet. Ranger Collins and Stevens check the marked path up to the campsite. No indication they ever made it that far. A chill runs through me that has nothing to do with the morning air. What about the family? Experienced hikers. Dad seems to know his way around. Mom's a nurse. Kids 10. Apparently healthy and active. They've done weekend trips before, but this was their first time in our neck of the woods. I trace the trail on the map with my finger, noting the places where hikers commonly get disoriented. I'll head up the eastern ridge. If they got lost, they might have headed uphill hoping for a better view. Mike hesitates. That's rough country, Anoli. Lot of deadfall from last year's storms. It's also where people tend to wander when they get confused by the trail markers. I don't add that it's also where I felt something watching me during my own solitary hikes, where the trees grow too close together and shadows linger longer than they should. Mike nods. All right. Check in every 30 minutes. We'll have teams covering the main trail and the western approach. I head out alone, the mist swallowing me as I leave the parking area. The forest feels different today. Tense, waiting. The usual sounds of birds and small creatures are muted. As I climb higher, following the faint game trail that few know about, my senses sharpen. This is what I was born for. This connection to the land, this ability to read the subtle signs that others miss. An hour passes. The fog thins slightly as I gain elevation, but the forest remains eerily quiet. I check in with Mike as promised, reporting no signs yet of the missing family. Then I spot it. A small piece of bright yellow fabric snagged on a thorny bush. I approach carefully, examining it without touching. It looks fresh, no weather damage. I take a photo and radio it in. Could be from their equipment, Mike responds. The daughter was wearing a yellow jacket according to the parent's description. I continue forward with renewed purpose, scanning the ground for tracks. The earth is soft from recent rain, and soon I find what I'm looking for, footprints. 3 sets. 1 large, the father, 1 medium, the mother, and 1 small, the child. They're moving off trail, heading deeper into the old growth section where few hikers venture. I follow the trail, noting how the footprints become more erratic, the spacing wider, suggesting they were running. But from what? I scan the surrounding area and freeze. There, pressed into a patch of mud, is a footprint unlike any I've seen before. It's massive, at least 16 inches long and incredibly wide, with 5 distinct toe impressions, too large for a bear, wrong shape for a mountain lion. It's almost human-like, but no human has feet this size. My grandfather's stories echo in my mind. The Cherokee have always known about the forest people, the tall ones who walk on 2 legs but are not men. The ones who stay hidden, watching from the shadows. The ones my ancestors called Nanwanuiu, the stone giants. Modern folks call them Bigfoot or Sasquatch, turning ancient knowledge into campfire stories and tabloid headlines. But my people have always known they were real. I take several photos of the strange footprint, but I don't radio it in. Mike and the others wouldn't understand. They'd waste precious time arguing about bear tracks or hoaxes when there's a child missing in these woods. The trail leads me deeper into the forest, to places where the trees grow so old and tall that little sunlight reaches the forest floor. The family's tracks are clear now. They were definitely running. And the other tracks, the impossible ones, are following them. Then I hear it. A faint cry carried on the wind. A child's voice. "Hello," I call out, breaking into a jog. "National Park Service. Can you hear me?" Another cry, slightly louder. I change direction, heading toward the sound. The fog parts briefly, and I catch a glimpse of color ahead. The yellow of a child's jacket. I run faster, my heart pounding. "I'm here to help. Park ranger." The girl appears suddenly from behind a large boulder, her face streaked with tears and dirt. She can't be more than 10, with dark braids and wide, terrified eyes. When she sees my uniform, she rushes toward me. "Please," she sobs, clinging to my jacket. "It took them. The monster took my mom and dad." I kneel down to her level, keeping my voice calm despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," she hiccups. "Lily? I'm Ranger Adair. You can call me Anoli. I'm going to help you find your parents, okay? Can you tell me what happened?" Her small body trembles. "We were setting up our tent. Dad heard something in the woods. He went to look, and then he started screaming. Mom told me to run and hide. The monster was so big, it had long arms and was covered in hair." A chill runs down my spine. "Did you see where it took your parents?" She points deeper into the forest, toward an area locals call the Dark Hollow, a place where the trees grow so dense that it seems like permanent twilight, even at noon on a sunny day. "They went that way," she whispers. "The monster was carrying them. Dad wasn't moving." I take a deep breath, centering myself. I need to get Lily to safety, but I also need to find her parents quickly if there's any hope of finding them alive. I reach for my radio, but as I do, a low rumbling sound echoes through the trees. It's not quite a growl, not quite a moan, something in between, something that raises the hair on the back of my neck. Lily whimpers and presses against me. The sound comes again, closer this time, and with it, the unmistakable crack of breaking branches. Something large moving through the forest toward us. I scoop Lily into my arms and move quickly behind a fallen log, pressing a finger to my lips to signal silence. Her eyes are wide with terror as the cracking sounds grow louder. Through the mist, a shape appears, massive, hulking, moving with surprising grace for its size. I catch glimpses through the trees, matted dark hair, powerful shoulders, long arms that nearly reach the ground. The creature pauses, lifting its head as if scenting the air. I hold my breath, one hand protectively around Lily, the other reaching slowly for my grandfather's medicine pouch. The ancient prayers come to my lips unbidden, Cherokee words asking for protection, for guidance, for strength. The massive figure turns its head in our direction. For one heart-stopping moment, I think it sees us. Then, as silently as it appeared, it moves away, vanishing into the mist and shadows of the Dark Hollow. Lily's trembling subsides slightly. "Is it gone?" she whispers. "For now," I murmur, my mind racing. I need to get her to safety, but her parents are out there, possibly injured, possibly. No, I won't think that way yet. I make my decision. "Lily, I'm going to take you back to the ranger station where there are other people who can look after you. Then I'm going to find your mom and dad." She clutches my jacket. "Promise you'll find them?" The weight of her trust settles on my shoulders. In her eyes I see the same fear I felt as a child when my own father disappeared into these same woods 25 years ago. They found his body 3 days later, the cause of death officially listed as a fall from a cliff. But my grandfather always believed something else was responsible, something that the official reports couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. "I promise," I tell Lily, the words binding me like an oath. "I'll find them." As we begin our careful journey back toward safety, I can't shake the feeling that we're still being watched. The forest has awakened to an ancient presence, and with it my own inherited knowledge stirs within me. The stories weren't just legends, the warnings weren't just superstition. Something walks these woods that doesn't belong to the world of men. And somehow I know that my path and its path are now fatefully intertwined. The ranger station buzzes with activity when I return with Lily. Relief washes over Mike's face when he sees the girl in my arms. quickly replaced by concern when he realizes her parents aren't with us. "What happened?" he asks, helping me settle Lily onto a bench where a female volunteer wraps her in a blanket. I pull Mike aside, keeping my voice low. The girl says something took her parents. I found tracks leading into Dark Hollow. "What kind of something, Anoli? Bear? Mountain lion?" I hesitate. She described it as large, covered in hair, walking on two legs. Mike's expression hardens. "A person? Some kind of backwoods psycho?" "I don't think so." I pull out my phone, showing him the photos of the enormous footprint. "I found these tracks following the family's trail." He studies the image, his brow furrowing. "Could be bear. They sometimes walk on their hind legs. Bears don't leave 16-inch footprints with 5 toes, Mike. And they don't carry off 2 adults." Mike runs a hand through his graying hair. "What are you saying, Anoli? That Bigfoot took these people? Come on, you know better." The familiar frustration rises within me. The modern world has no place for ancient knowledge, for the truths my ancestors understood. But arguing won't help the missing parents. All I know is 2 people are missing, possibly injured, and their daughter says something took them into Dark Hollow. I'm going back out there to find them. "Not alone. You're not," Mike says firmly. "We'll assemble a team." "There's no time," I cut him off. "And a large group will make too much noise. I can move faster and quieter on my own." I check my watch. It's just past noon. I've got about 6 hours of daylight left. If I don't find them by dusk, I'll come back and we can organize a larger search party for tomorrow. Mike looks like he wants to argue, but 15 years of working together has taught him to trust my judgment in the field. "Fine, but you check in every 20 minutes without fail. If you miss even one check-in, I'm sending everyone we've got after you." I nod, already mentally preparing for what lies ahead. I restock my pack with fresh supplies, add a more powerful flashlight, and check the batteries in my radio. As I'm about to leave, Lily runs up to me, her small hand clutching something. "Take this," she says, pressing a small object into my palm. "It's my lucky rock. Dad says it keeps bad things away." I look down at the smooth river stone, painted with a child's careful hand to resemble a fox face. The coincidence makes my breath catch. The fox, my namesake, my spirit guide according to my grandfather. "Thank you, Lily," I say solemnly, tucking the stone into the same pocket as my medicine pouch. "I'll bring it back when I find your parents." Her absolute faith in me is both heartwarming and terrifying. I can't fail her. I won't. The forest feels different as I make my way back to where I found Lily. The fog has mostly lifted, but an unnatural stillness has settled over the woods. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Even the wind seems to have died down, leaving the trees unnaturally still. I find the spot where I first encountered the massive footprint and pick up the trail again. The tracks lead deeper into Dark Hollow, just as Lily said. I follow cautiously, all my senses alert for any sign of danger or of the missing parents. The light dims as I enter the hollow, the dense canopy blocking much of the afternoon sun. Old-growth trees tower around me, their massive trunks covered in moss and lichen. This part of the forest has remained largely untouched for centuries, one of the few areas that escaped the aggressive logging of the early 1900s. My grandfather brought me here as a child, teaching me the old ways, showing me how to listen to the forest. "This place remembers," he told me. "The trees have witnessed the passage of our people for 1,000 years. They've seen things that would turn a man's hair white overnight." I check in with Mike as promised, reporting my position and direction of travel. His response is garbled by static. I'm moving into an area with poor radio reception. Not surprising, but concerning. The footprints continue, sometimes accompanied by drag marks that make my heart sink. If the creature is dragging the parents, it suggests they're unable to walk, either unconscious or worse. An hour into Dark Hollow, the trail leads me to a small clearing. I stop abruptly, taking in the scene before me. In the center of the clearing stands a crude structure, almost like a shelter built from broken branches and foliage, and scattered around it are items that clearly belong to Lily's family. A torn backpack, a woman's hiking boot, a man's cap. I approach cautiously, documenting everything with my phone's camera. The shelter is about 7 feet tall, with an opening that faces away from the main trail. It reminds me of the temporary structures my grandfather described in his stories, the kind that the forest people were said to build when they stayed in one area for a time. I'm about to examine the inside of the structure when I hear it. A low moan coming from somewhere beyond the clearing. Human, filled with pain. I freeze, listening intently. The sound comes again, slightly louder. Hello? I call out, moving toward the sound. National Park Service. Can you hear me? Another moan, followed by a weak voice. Help. Please. I push through a dense thicket of rhododendron and find myself in another, smaller clearing. There, propped against a tree, is a man in his 40s, his clothing torn and dirty, his face scratched and bruised. Lily's father. I rush to his side, immediately checking his vitals. His pulse is rapid but strong, and while he's clearly injured, none of his wounds appear life-threatening. Sir, I'm Ranger Adair. Your daughter Lily is safe. Can you tell me what happened? Where's your wife? His eyes flutter open, unfocused at first, then widening with recognition when he sees my uniform. The creature, he gasps. It took Sarah, deeper into the woods. You have to help her. What creature, sir? What did you see? He grips my arm with surprising strength. Bigfoot, he whispers, his voice cracking. I know how it sounds, but I swear to God it was real. 8, maybe 9 feet tall, covered in dark hair. It came out of nowhere, grabbed Sarah, knocked me aside like I was nothing. I believe him, of course, but I keep my expression neutral. How long ago? Hours, maybe. I blacked out after hitting my head. Woke up here. He tries to sit up straighter, wincing in pain. Please, you have to find Sarah. I will, I assure him, helping him drink from my water bottle. But first I need to get you to safety. Can you walk if I help you? He nods grimly. I think my ribs are cracked. Maybe my ankle too, but I can move. I help him to his feet, supporting most of his weight. What's your name, sir? David? He says through gritted teeth. David Mercer. Okay, David, we're going to move slowly back toward the ranger station. It's about 2 miles. I'll radio ahead so they can send help to meet us partway. He stops, looking panicked. No! We can't leave Sarah out here with that thing. I understand his fear, but I have my priorities as a ranger. David, you need medical attention, and I can move faster on my own. Once I get you to safety, I promise I'll come back for Sarah. The conflict plays across his face. The desperate need to find his wife warring with the physical reality of his injuries. Finally, he nods. Lily, he says suddenly. Is she really okay? She's fine, I assure him. Scared but unharmed. She's the one who told us where to look for you. Relief washes over his features. Thank God. We begin our slow journey back, with me supporting David's weight and constantly scanning our surroundings. I try the radio several times, but the signal remains weak. The transmission's broken by static. We'll have to make it at least to the edge of Dark Hollow before I can reliably call for assistance. David tries to fill me in as we walk. They had been setting up camp when they heard strange noises in the underbrush. Thinking it might be a bear, David grabbed the bear spray they'd brought along. But what emerged from the trees was no bear. It just stood there watching us, he says, his voice hollow with remembered terror. So tall. Its eyes, they looked almost human, but not quite. There was intelligence there, but something wild, too. Did it make any sounds? I ask, thinking of the rumbling growl I'd heard earlier. A kind of, I don't know how to describe it, like a low moan that turned into something deeper. Sarah screamed, and that seemed to trigger it. It rushed forward, grabbed her around the waist, and just took her. I tried to stop it, sprayed the bear spray, but it barely seemed to notice. It just swatted me aside like I was a fly. We paused to rest. David's breathing labored from exertion and pain. I checked the time, nearly 4 o'clock. The light is already beginning to fade in the dense forest, and we're moving slowly. At this rate, it will be dusk by the time we reach the edge of Dark Hollow. Did you see which way it went after taking your wife? I ask as I help him drink more water. He points deeper into the hollow, toward the northwest. That way. There's a ridge of rocky outcroppings. It headed straight for them. I know the area he's describing. Locals call it the Devil's Backbone. a series of limestone cliffs and caves that run for nearly a mile through the heart of Dark Hollow. It's treacherous terrain seldom visited even by experienced hikers. We continue on, each step clearly agonizing for David. Despite his injuries, he pushes forward with grim determination, driven by concern for his wife and daughter. I admire his resilience. As we near the edge of Dark Hollow, my radio finally crackles to life with Mike's voice, demanding a status update. I quickly explain the situation, requesting medical assistance for David and informing Mike that the mother is still missing. "I've got EMTs standing by," Mike responds. "What about the mother? Any sign of her?" "Not yet," I say, keeping my voice neutral for David's benefit. "But I've got a lead on her possible location. I'll head there as soon as Mr. Mercer is safely with your team." "Inoli, it's almost dusk. Whatever's out there, bear, mountain lion, whatever, it's too dangerous to be tracking it alone in the dark." I move a few steps away from David, lowering my voice. "Mike, this woman doesn't have until morning. You know as well as I do that survival rates drop dramatically after the first 24 hours. A long pause, then a resigned sigh. "Fine, but you take every precaution. Full gear, constant check-ins as long as you have signal. And you pull out at the first sign of serious danger, understood?" "Understood." Within 30 minutes, we meet up with 2 other rangers and an EMT who take charge of David. As they prepare to transport him back to the ranger station, he grabs my hand. "Find her," he pleads. "Please." I nod solemnly. "I will. Tell Lily I'm still keeping her lucky rock safe." A ghost of a smile crosses his face. "That rock, she's convinced it has magic powers." "Maybe it does," I say, patting my pocket where both the painted stone and my grandfather's medicine pouch rest. "Sometimes the old magic is stronger than we think." As David is carried away on a stretcher, I check my gear one last time, mentally preparing for what lies ahead. The sun is setting, casting long shadows through the trees. Night in the forest brings new dangers, but also new possibilities. Some creatures grow bolder in darkness. I turn back toward Dark Hollow, toward the Devil's Backbone where David said the creature had taken his wife. The forest seems to hold its breath as I enter its depths once more, this time alone, with only the fading light to guide me. My grandfather's voice echoes in my memory. "The forest people are not evil, Inoli, but they are not human either. They follow different laws, older laws. They take what they need, as all creatures do. It is not malice that drives them, but necessity." "What necessity would drive one to take a human woman?" The question haunts me as I make my way deeper into Dark Hollow, following an ancient trail that few modern eyes have seen, toward a confrontation I have somehow always known was coming. Night falls quickly in Dark Hollow. One moment there's enough light filtering through the canopy to see by. The next, darkness envelops the forest like a shroud. I switch on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom but also announcing my presence to anything watching from the shadows. The temperature drops rapidly, my breath forming small clouds in the chill air. The forest sounds change with nightfall. The daytime birds go silent, replaced by the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant yipping of coyotes. I move carefully, following the faint trail toward the Devil's Backbone. My radio crackles with Mike's voice checking in. I keep my response brief, confirming my position and direction. The signal is weak again, breaking up with static. Soon I'll be out of range entirely. The trail becomes steeper as I approach the limestone ridges. In the beam of my flashlight, I catch glimpses of massive footprints in patches of soft earth, the same tracks I've been following all day. They're fresher here, more defined. The creature passed this way recently, perhaps within the last few hours. A new sound reaches my ears. Water flowing over rocks. There's a stream that runs along the base of the Devil's Backbone, fed by underground springs that emerge from the limestone caves. The sound grows louder as I continue forward, until I reach the bank of the swiftly flowing water. The trail disappears at the water's edge. I pan my flashlight across the stream, searching for where it might continue on the other side. Instead, the beam catches something reflective, a small object half buried in the mud of the opposite bank. I wade across carefully, the cold water reaching mid-thigh at its deepest point. On the other side, I kneel and examine the object, a woman's wristwatch with a broken strap. The face is cracked, the hands stopped at 247, This must be Sarah's. I bag it as evidence, but more importantly, it confirms I'm on the right track. The creature crossed the stream here with its captive, but where did it go next? I scan the ground for tracks, finding nothing in the rocky soil near the stream. Then I look up. The Devil's Backbone looms above me, a jagged line of limestone cliffs rising 50 feet into the night sky. In the beam of my flashlight, I spot what appears to be an opening about halfway up, the mouth of a cave. My radio gives one final sputter of static, then goes dead. I'm on my own now, out of communication range. I check my watch, just past 7 p.m. The Rangers will expect me back by midnight. If I don't return or make contact by then, they'll send out a search party at first light. 5 hours to find Sarah Mercer and bring her back safely. 5 hours to confront whatever took her. I begin to climb, finding handholds in the rough limestone. It's a challenging ascent in the dark, but my years of experience serve me well. 20 minutes later, I pull myself onto a narrow ledge in front of the cave opening. The entrance is larger than it appeared from below, about 7 feet high and twice as wide. A perfect shelter for something that wants to remain hidden. I pause at the threshold, listening intently. From deep within comes the sound of dripping water and, faintly, what might be breathing. "Sarah?" I call out, my voice echoing in the cavern. "Sarah Mercer? National Park Service. I'm here to help you." No response but the continued sound of dripping water. I take a deep breath and step into the cave, my flashlight beam probing the darkness ahead. The passage extends about 20 feet before opening into a larger chamber. The air is cool and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and something else, a musky animal odor that makes my nose wrinkle. As I enter the chamber, my light falls on a pile of foliage and branches arranged in a rough circle, a nest of some kind. And beside it, lying motionless on the stone floor, is a woman in torn hiking clothes. Sarah Mercer. I rush to her side, checking for injuries. She's unconscious but breathing steadily. A gash on her forehead has bled profusely, but the wound itself doesn't appear deep. Her arms and legs show multiple bruises and scratches, but no obvious broken bones. "Sarah?" I say urgently, gently tapping her cheek. "Sarah, can you hear me? I'm a park ranger. I'm here to get you out." Her eyelids flutter, then open slowly. For a moment, her gaze is unfocused. Then she sees me, and terror fills her eyes. "It's okay," I assure her quickly. "You're safe now. I'm Ranger Adair. Your husband and daughter are safe. I'm going to take you to them." "The creature," she whispers hoarsely. "Is it gone?" I glance around the cave, suddenly very aware that we might not be alone. "I don't know. Can you move? We need to get out of here." She nods weakly, trying to sit up. I help her, supporting her weight as she struggles to her feet. She sways dangerously, and I realize she's in no condition to make the climb down from the cave. "What happened, Sarah? Did it hurt you?" She shakes her head, looking bewildered. "No, it brought me water, berries. It just watched me, like it was curious." She clutches my arm. "What was it, Ranger? What took me?" Before I can answer, a low rumbling growl echoes through the cave, raising the hair on the back of my neck. Sarah's grip on my arm tightens painfully. "It's back," she whispers. I turn slowly, pointing my flashlight toward the cave entrance. The beam catches a massive figure filling the passageway, at least 8 feet tall, its broad shoulders nearly touching both walls. Matted dark hair covers its body, longer around the face, which remains in shadow despite my light. The creature lets out another growl, this one more aggressive. It takes a step forward, its movements surprisingly fluid for something so large. I push Sarah behind me, backing us toward the far wall of the chamber. My mind races through options. I have a canister of bear spray on my belt, but in the confined space of the cave, using it would affect us as badly as the creature. My sidearm is a last resort. I have no desire to harm this being if I can avoid it. Instead, I reach slowly into my pocket and withdraw my grandfather's medicine pouch. The creature watches intently, its eyes reflecting my flashlight with an amber glow. "We mean no harm," I say, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "This woman has a family, children who need her. I must take her back." To my surprise, the creature tilts its head, as if considering my words. Can it understand human speech? My grandfather always said the forest people had their own language but could comprehend ours if they chose to. I continue speaking, my tone respectful but firm. I am Anoli of the Cherokee people. My ancestors have walked these forests since time began. They knew of your kind. They respected your territory. As I speak, I open the medicine pouch and take out a pinch of the sacred herbs inside, tobacco, cedar, sage, and cast them toward the creature in the traditional offering. I ask for safe passage, I say in Cherokee, the words my grandfather taught me flowing naturally. Honor the old ways. Allow us to leave in peace. For a long moment the cave is silent except for Sarah's frightened breathing behind me. Then the creature makes a new sound. Not a growl, but a series of clicks and low whoops that raise goosebumps on my arms. It steps to one side of the passage, not completely clearing the way, but creating enough space that we might pass by without touching it. Sarah, I murmur, stay close to me. Move slowly. No sudden movements. She nods against my shoulder, trembling but determined. Together we begin to edge along the wall toward the passageway, keeping as much distance as possible between ourselves and the creature. Its amber eyes follow our movement, its massive head turning to track our progress. Up close, I can see more details: the broad, flat nose, the heavy brow ridge, the surprisingly expressive eyes that hold something that looks almost like intelligence or curiosity. We reach the passage, and I position myself between Sarah and the creature as we slowly make our way toward the cave entrance. It remains where it is, watching us retreat, occasionally making those strange clicking sounds. At the cave mouth, cool night air washes over us. Sarah exhales shakily, her death grip on my arm finally relaxing slightly. Can you make it down? I ask her, eyeing the steep descent. She looks doubtful. I'm not sure. I feel weak, dizzy. I make a quick decision. I'll go first, help guide your feet. We'll take it slow. The climb down is nerve-wracking. Sarah is unsteady, and several times I fear she'll lose her grip. But determination drives her, the need to return to her family giving her strength beyond her physical condition. When we finally reach the ground, she collapses against me, exhausted. I support her weight, already planning our route back. We need to cross the stream again, then follow the trail back through Dark Hollow. It will be challenging in the dark, with Sarah injured, but we have no choice. As I help her toward the stream, I glance back up at the cave. The creature stands at the entrance, its massive silhouette visible against the night sky, watching us, letting us go. We wade across the stream, the cold water reviving Sarah somewhat. On the other side, I help her sit on a fallen log to rest before we continue our journey. What was that thing? She asks, her voice steadier now. I consider how to answer. Most people aren't ready for the truth about what lives in these ancient forests. But Sarah has seen it with her own eyes, felt its touch, breathed the same air in that cave. The Cherokee call them Nununui, I tell her. The stone giants. Other tribes have different names. Modern people call them Sasquatch or Bigfoot. She stares at me. Bigfoot is real? And it kidnapped me? They're real, I confirm. As for why it took you, I can't say for certain. My grandfather told stories of the forest people sometimes taking humans out of curiosity. They rarely harm their captives unless threatened. Sarah shakes her head in disbelief. Will anyone believe us? Probably not, I admit. And maybe that's for the better. These beings have managed to stay hidden for centuries because most people dismiss the possibility of their existence. It protects them. Are you suggesting we lie about what happened? I help her to her feet, supporting her as we begin walking. I'm suggesting we focus on what matters. You're safe. You're going back to your family. As for what took you, I shrug. Maybe it was a bear. Maybe you fell and hit your head, became disoriented, found shelter in that cave. The official report can reflect whatever explanation makes the most sense to you. We move slowly through the forest, Sarah leaning heavily on me. The night is alive with sounds, the hooting of owls, the rustle of nocturnal creatures in the underbrush. But I remain alert for one sound in particular, the deep rumbling growl of the being that for reasons of its own decided to let us go. About an hour into our journey, Sarah stops suddenly. Listen, she whispers. I freeze, hearing what she's heard. The crack of branches breaking some distance behind us. Something large moving through the forest. It's following us, Sarah says, fear creeping back into her voice. Keep moving, I urge gently. It's just making sure we leave its territory. We continue forward, and the sounds follow at a distance. Never approaching, never threatening, but always there. A reminder that we are not alone in these woods. Finally, we reach the edge of Dark Hollow, where the forest begins to thin, and the trail becomes more distinct. The sounds of pursuit fade away, as if the creature has reached the boundary of its domain and will go no further. As we emerge from the denser forest, my radio suddenly crackles to life. We're back in range. Mike's voice comes through, tense with worry. Inoli, do you copy? It's been hours without contact. I respond quickly, informing him that I found Sarah Mercer alive and mostly unharmed. His relief is audible as he tells me that a search team is already on its way to meet us. Within 20 minutes, we spot the bobbing flashlights of the approaching rangers. Sarah's strength is failing rapidly, and she's nearly unconscious by the time the search team reaches us. The EMTs take over, placing her on a stretcher and starting an IV. Mike pulls me aside as they work. What happened out there, Inoli? Where did you find her? I hesitate, remembering my conversation with Sarah. She'd taken shelter in a cave along the Devil's Backbone, probably disoriented after getting separated from her husband. She has a head injury that needs attention. Mike studies me closely. And the thing that took her husband described? Did you see any sign of it? I meet his gaze steadily. I found large tracks, possibly bare. Nothing conclusive. He doesn't look entirely convinced, but nods anyway. Well, you found her. That's what matters. The family owes you their lives. As the search team begins the journey back to the ranger station with Sarah on the stretcher, I fall in beside Mike. The forest is quiet around us, peaceful even, as if the tension of the last 12 hours has finally broken, but I can't shake the feeling of being watched. Occasionally, I glance back toward Dark Hollow, its depths now completely hidden in night's embrace. Something ancient dwells there. Something that chose to let us go when it could have kept us. My grandfather's voice seems to whisper on the breeze. The forest remembers Inoli, and so do its oldest inhabitants. I touch the pocket containing Lily's painted stone and my grandfather's medicine pouch. Old magic indeed, perhaps stronger than we know. 3 days have passed since I found Sarah Mercer in that cave on the Devil's Backbone. The official report lists her experience as a case of disorientation following a head injury, possibly caused by a fall. David Mercer's account of a large hairy creature is attributed to concussion-induced confusion. Case closed, filed away, another wilderness mishap with a happy ending. Except I know better. I stand at my cabin window, watching the rain fall in sheets across the valley below. The forest is shrouded in mist, the mountains beyond barely visible. It's the kind of day that keeps visitors away from the park. The kind of day when rangers catch up on paperwork and equipment maintenance. But I can't focus. The encounter in the cave plays on repeat in my mind. Those amber eyes studying me, the strange clicking sounds, the way it stepped aside to let us pass. Not the behavior of a mindless beast, but of a being making a conscious choice. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Mike. Mercer's checking out today. Thought you might want to say goodbye. I hesitate. Since that night, I've kept my distance from the family, filing my report but avoiding further contact. Sarah had been semi-conscious during our escape from the cave. I wasn't sure how much she remembered or what she'd told the others about our conversation regarding the creature, but something pulls me toward this final meeting. I grab my rain gear and head for my truck. The ranger station is quiet when I arrive, just Mike and a seasonal ranger manning the desk. The Mercer family is gathered near the entrance, their car packed and ready for departure. Lily spots me first, her face lighting up as she runs over. "Ranger Inoli," she exclaims, throwing her arms around my waist. "I knew you'd come." I smile down at her, surprised by how much her small show of affection affects me. "I hear you're heading home today." She nods vigorously. "Mom's feeling better. The doctor said she can travel now." I look up to see David and Sarah approaching. David walks with a slight limp, his ribs bandaged beneath his shirt but otherwise looks remarkably recovered. Sarah has a bandage on her forehead, but her eyes are clear and alert. "Ranger Adair," David says warmly, extending his hand. We can't thank you enough for what you did. I shake his hand. Just doing my job, sir. I'm glad your family is reunited and recovering. Sarah studies me intently, something unspoken passing between us. Then she steps forward and embraces me, whispering in my ear, "Thank you for respecting my choice." She steps back and I understand. She's chosen not to share the full truth of what happened in that cave, even with her family. Some experiences are too profound, too strange for others to comprehend. Sometimes the truth is a burden best carried alone. "Oh," Lily suddenly exclaims. "Your lucky rock, I almost forgot." I reach into my pocket, retrieving the painted stone. "It worked perfectly," I tell her, placing it in her small palm. "Very powerful magic." She beams, then lowers her voice conspiratorially. "Did you see the monster?" Before I can respond, David interjects with a gentle laugh. "Lily, we've talked about this. There was no monster, sweetie. Dad just got confused because of his injury." Lily looks doubtful but doesn't argue. Children often see truth more clearly than adults, unfiltered by preconceptions of what is and isn't possible. "Well, we should get on the road," David says. "We've got a long drive ahead." As they turn to leave, Sarah pauses. "Will you walk us to the car, Ranger Adair? I have a question about the park I forgot to ask." Outside, as David helps Lily into the back seat, Sarah turns to me. "I remember everything," she says quietly. "The cave, our conversation, what you called it, non you knew we." I nod, unsurprised. "And you chose not to tell your family, would you?" David's convinced himself it was all confusion from his concussion. And Lily, she glances at her daughter through the car window. "She's young enough that in time she'll begin to doubt her own memories. But you won't forget," I say, a statement rather than a question. "How could I? It held me captive for hours but never hurt me. It brought me water, berries, it seemed curious." She wraps her arms around herself, as if suddenly cold despite the mild temperature. "I keep thinking about its eyes. There was intelligence there. My grandfather believed they were an ancient people," I tell her. "Not human, but not simply animals either. Somewhere in between, with their own society, their own rules. Do you think there are more of them out there?" I look toward the misty forest. "Yes, though they're skilled at remaining hidden. Most people can spend a lifetime in these woods and never catch a glimpse, yet you knew exactly where to look for me." "How?" The question catches me off guard. How indeed? I had followed tracks, yes, but something else had guided me as well. An instinct that went beyond ranger training. A connection to the forest that seemed to whisper directions. "I grew up in these mountains," I say finally. "My family has been here for generations. You learn to read the signs." She seems to accept this, though her eyes tell me she senses there's more to the story. "Well, whatever guided you, I'm grateful. You saved my life, Ranger Adair." "Anoli," I correct her. "Please, call me Anoli." "Anoli," she repeats, smiling. "What does it mean?" "Black fox," I tell her. "It's Cherokee, a fitting name for someone who moves so confidently through these woods." She glances back at her waiting family. "I should go, but I wanted you to know that your secret, their secret, is safe with me." I watch as she joins her family in the car, as they drive away from the ranger station and, presumably from the memory of what happened in Dark Hollow. For them, it will become a story that fades with time, perhaps emerging occasionally around campfires or during late-night conversations, but ultimately relegated to the realm of "remember that weird thing that happened once?" For me, it's different. The encounter has awakened something, stirred memories of my grandfather's teachings that I had filed away in the practical corners of my mind. For 15 years, I've been a ranger first, Cherokee second. Science over tradition, observable facts over ancient knowledge, but now the lines have blurred. I've seen with my own eyes what my ancestors spoke of in stories passed down through generations. The forest people are real. And somehow, I am connected to them. Back in my cabin that evening, I dig through old boxes stored in the attic, searching for something specific. Finally, I find it. A worn leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. My grandfather's journal, given to me after his death. I settle into my reading chair, a fire crackling in the hearth, and begin to read. The journal is written mostly in Cherokee, with occasional passages in English. My grandfather documented his own encounters with the forest people, experiences similar to mine, but there's more. He writes of a special relationship between our family line and the beings he calls the Ancient Ones. According to the journal, our ancestor, a medicine man named C.U. Gansini, once saved the life of one of the forest people who had been gravely wounded by European trappers. In gratitude, the creatures formed a pact with C.U.'s bloodline. They would remain guardians of the sacred places in Cherokee lands, and in return, C.U.'s descendants would help protect their existence from the encroaching world of men. Is this why I felt drawn to become a ranger? Why I've always been most at home in the deepest, wildest parts of the forest? Why I knew somehow exactly where to look for Sarah Mercer? A loud crack of thunder startles me from my reading. The storm has intensified. Rain lashing against the windows, wind howling through the trees. I rise to add another log to the fire, and as I do, something catches my eye through the window. A movement at the edge of the forest that borders my property. I peer through the rain-streaked glass, seeing nothing at first. Then a flash of lightning illuminates the tree line, and I freeze. There, standing between two massive oaks, is a familiar silhouette. 8 feet tall, broad-shouldered, watching my cabin. My heart races, but not with fear. With recognition. With understanding. The creature raises one massive arm, almost like a greeting, then turns and disappears into the forest as the lightning fades. I remain at the window long after it's gone, staring into the darkness. It found me. It knows where I live. And somehow I'm not surprised. Not afraid. My grandfather's journal lies open on the chair, its pages filled with the history of my bloodline, with the responsibility passed down through generations. A responsibility I've carried unknowingly until now. The forest has secrets. Ancient beings still walk its depths. And I, an Oli Adair, stand at the threshold between their world and ours, a guardian of both. As the storm rages outside, I make a decision. Tomorrow, I will return to Dark Hollow, to the Devil's Backbone, not as a ranger pursuing a missing person, but as a descendant of Chiu Gansini, acknowledging the pact made long ago. The forest people have revealed themselves to me. Now I must honor what that means. Dawn breaks clear and crisp after the night's storm. The forest gleams in the early light, droplets of rain clinging to leaves and pine needles, creating a world of sparkling jewels. I stand at the edge of my property, breathing in the clean, washed air, mentally preparing for what lies ahead. I've called in a personal day, my first in over 2 years. Mike hadn't questioned it, assuming I needed rest after the intense search for the Mercer family. If he knew my true destination, he'd probably think I'd lost my mind. My pack is lighter today. No ranger gear, no radio, no sidearm. Instead, I carry only essentials: water, food, a first aid kit, a knife, and my grandfather's journal. And in a small deerskin pouch, a special offering prepared according to instructions found in the journal's final pages. The hike to Dark Hollow takes most of the morning. I follow game trails rather than marked paths, moving deeper into the wilderness with each step. Birds sing overhead, small animals rustle in the underbrush, the forest going about its daily business, unconcerned with my presence. By midday, I reach the stream at the base of the Devil's Backbone. The water runs clear and cold, swollen slightly from the previous night's rain. I cross carefully, then stand looking up at the limestone cliffs. The cave where I found Sarah is visible, its dark mouth a stark contrast against the pale rock. But I'm not headed there. According to my grandfather's journal, there's another place, a sacred meeting ground used for generations by my ancestors and the forest people, a place of covenant. I follow the base of the cliffs northward, searching for the landmark described in the journal, a stone formation resembling a seated bear. After nearly an hour, I find it, an outcropping of rock that from the right angle does indeed look like a bear resting on its haunches. Behind this formation, partially hidden by brush and fallen rock, is a narrow fissure in the cliff face. I squeeze through, finding myself in a tight passage that forces me to crouch as I move forward. The air grows cooler, damper, the sunlight fading behind me. The passage opens suddenly into a large chamber, far larger than the cave where I found Sarah. Enough light filters through cracks in the ceiling to illuminate the space dimly. What I see takes my breath away. The walls are covered with paintings, handprints in red ochre, spiraling symbols, depictions of animals and stick-figure humans, and among them taller figures with broad shoulders and long arms rendered in careful detail. The artwork spans generations, some faded with extreme age, others looking relatively recent. In the center of the chamber stands a stone altar of sorts, a flat rock supported by smaller ones, creating a table-like surface. Around it, the ground is clear of debris as if the space has been maintained. This is it, the meeting place described in my grandfather's journal, where Tsiyu formalized the pact with the forest people, and where subsequent generations have renewed that covenant. I approach the altar slowly, reverently. According to the journal, I should leave my offering here and then wait. The forest people will come if they choose to, if they recognize me as a descendant of Tsiyu. From my pouch, I take the items prepared for this moment: tobacco, cornmeal, and cedar, mixed according to my grandfather's instructions. I place this on the altar, then add a personal item, a small carving of a fox that I've carried since childhood, a gift from my grandfather. Then I sit cross-legged on the chamber floor facing the altar and wait. Time passes differently in the dim cave. Minutes stretch to hours as I sit motionless, breathing slowly, focusing my mind as my grandfather taught me. Outside, the sun traverses the sky, its angle changing the quality of light that filters through the ceiling cracks. I don't know how long I've been waiting when I first hear it. A subtle change in the cave's acoustics, a sense of air displacement. Someone, something has entered the chamber. I remain still, eyes forward, resisting the urge to turn toward the sound. The journal was explicit. Show respect, show patience, show trust. A shadow falls across the altar. A large figure moves into my peripheral vision, then another. They've entered from some passage I didn't notice, silently materializing like spirits. Only when one of them makes that distinctive clicking sound do I finally turn my head to look upon them directly. 3 of the forest people stand in a semicircle behind me. The largest, nearly 9 feet tall, appears to be male, with silvery gray hair intermixed with the dark brown covering his body. Beside him stands another male, slightly smaller but more muscular, and to their left, a female, her form more slender, her hair longer around the face. Their features are both familiar and alien. Broad, flat noses, heavy brow ridges, deep-set eyes that watch me with unmistakable intelligence. They are not human, yet there's a humanoid quality to them that makes the encounter less terrifying than it might otherwise be. The largest one steps forward, approaching the altar. He examines my offering, then makes a series of low hoots and clicks that might be language. He picks up the fox carving, turning it in his massive hands with surprising delicacy, then looks directly at me. I rise slowly to my feet, keeping my movements deliberate and non-threatening. The creature towers over me, yet I feel no fear, only a profound sense of connection, of rightness. This meeting has been generations in the making. Following instructions from the journal, I speak in Cherokee, introducing myself. I am Enoli Adair, descendant of Tsiyu. I come to honor the covenant between our peoples. The creature tilts his massive head, studying me. Then, to my astonishment, he responds, not in Cherokee or English, but in a series of sounds that somehow convey meaning to me, as if the words bypass my ears and speak directly to my mind. You carry the blood of the covenant maker. We have watched you. I blink in surprise, not sure if I'm truly hearing words or simply interpreting sounds through some deeper instinctual understanding. You've been watching me? I ask. Many seasons. You walk our forests. You wear the badge of the protectors. But only now do you remember the old ways. The female steps forward, her movements graceful despite her size. She makes a gesture toward the fox carving, still held by the male. The black fox, your spirit guide. It led you to the female taken by young Hunter. I realize she's referring to Sarah Mercer and the creature that took her. Apparently a younger member of their kind, perhaps less experienced in avoiding human contact. Why did he take her? I ask. The largest one, the leader I assume, places the fox carving back on the altar before responding. Curiosity, confusion. The young ones sometimes forget the old ways. The times of taking humans are past. It is too dangerous now with your machines that see in darkness that fly above the trees. I think of trail cameras, helicopters, drones, all the technology that makes it increasingly difficult for any creature to remain hidden in the wilderness. Yet you've managed to stay hidden, I observe. Few believe you exist. We are few now. The female communicates, once many, now scattered. These mountains are our last sanctuary. A profound sadness accompanies her message. I feel it as much as understand it. These beings are the last of their kind, at least in these mountains, perhaps in this part of the world entirely. The covenant, I say, bringing the conversation back to the purpose of my visit. My grandfather's journal speaks of a pact between my ancestor and your people. A promise of mutual protection. The leader makes a sweeping gesture around the chamber, indicating the wall paintings. The covenant is written here. Your ancestor saved one of ours from the metal traps of the Pale Men. In return, we became guardians of your sacred places. You became keepers of our secret. It has been so for 7 generations of your kind. 7 generations? That would date the pact to the early 1800s, during the period when European trappers and settlers were first pushing into Cherokee territory in large numbers. I wish to honor this covenant, I tell them. But I need to understand what it means in today's world. How can I help protect your people? The 3 forest people exchange looks, communicating in their clicking language in a way I cannot interpret. Then the leader turns back to me. The forest shrinks. Men cut roads through ancient trees, machines dig into the earth. Our hiding places grow fewer each season. We need safe territory where your kind cannot go. I consider this. As a ranger, I'm familiar with the ongoing tension between conservation and development, between protecting wilderness and allowing public access to it. There are parts of the Cherokee National Forest that are seldom visited, but legally, humans have the right to enter almost anywhere. I don't have the authority to restrict access to public lands, I explain, but I might be able to help in other ways. I think of the proposed expansion of the protected wilderness area within the forest, a conservation project that's been in discussion for years. If approved, it would place strict limitations on development and motorized access to nearly 50,000 additional acres, much of it in the Dark Hollow region. There's a wilderness designation being considered, I continue. It would protect a large area of the forest from development, keep it wild. I could advocate for that, help ensure it passes. The female makes an excited sound, communicating. The quiet forest would be safe for the young ones. The leader seems to consider this, then nods his massive head. It would be a beginning. But there is more we ask of the fox descendant. What more? Knowledge. The metal eyes in the trees, your cameras. The flying machines that see heat, your helicopters. We must know where they are, when they come, so we can hide. I understand immediately. They're asking for information about surveillance technologies used in the forest. Trail cameras set up by researchers, thermal imaging equipment used in search and rescue operations, helicopters that patrol during fire season. It's a reasonable request. Not interference with these operations, just advanced knowledge so the forest people can avoid detection. I can do that, I agree. I have access to that information as a ranger. The leader makes a sound that feels like approval, then gestures to the muscular male who has remained silent until now. This one steps forward, reaching into what appears to be a crude pouch made of hide that hangs at his waist. He withdraws something and extends his massive hand toward me. In his palm lies a necklace, a leather cord threaded through what looks like a carved stone pendant. I accept it carefully, examining the pendant in the dim light. It's a fox, rendered in surprising detail, carved from a greenish stone that might be local soapstone. The mark of the covenant, the leader explains. Wear it. When you walk the deep forest, our hunters will know you as friend. I slip the necklace over my head, feeling the weight of the pendant against my chest. More than jewelry, it's a symbol of acceptance, of belonging to an ancient pact. Thank you, I say, touching the carving. I will honor our agreement. The 3 forest people make gestures that I interpret as affirmation. Then the leader communicates one final message. The covenant renews with your blood. But remember, fox descendant, we protect our own. Those who threaten us, who hunt us, are not under our protection, even if they wear the same badge as you. The warning is clear. While they accept me as an ally, other rangers or forest personnel who might pose a threat to them would not receive the same consideration. I understand, I respond solemnly, and I accept the responsibility. With that, the meeting appears to conclude. The three forest people back away toward the dark passage from which they emerged. The female is the last to leave, pausing to make a gesture that somehow communicates both farewell and an expectation of future meetings. Then they are gone, melting into the shadows as silently as they appeared, leaving me alone in the chamber with my offering still on the altar and the fox pendant heavy against my chest. I remain for a time, absorbing what has transpired. I've communicated with beings that most of humanity believes are mere legend. I've renewed a pact made generations ago. I've accepted a role that places me between two worlds. The modern world of science and law that I serve as a ranger, and the ancient world of mystery and primal knowledge that exists in the deepest parts of the forest. Eventually, I gather my belongings and make my way back through the narrow passage to the outside world. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the forest. I'll need to hike quickly to reach the edge of Dark Hollow before full dark. As I make my way down from the Devil's Backbone, I touch the pendant around my neck, this tangible proof that I haven't imagined the entire encounter. The forest around me feels different now, more alive, more aware. Perhaps it always was, and I'm the one who's changed, who now sees with clearer eyes. My grandfather's final journal entry makes sense to me now, in a way it didn't before. The forest has many guardians, Anoli. Some walk on 2 legs, some on 4. Some wear badges, others wear only their ancient wisdom. When you understand that you are one guardian among many, you will have found your true purpose. Night falls as I reach the edge of Dark Hollow, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Behind me, from deep within the forest, comes the faint sound of hooting calls. The forest people communicating with each other across the ridges and valleys. Not a threat, but a reminder. I am not alone in my guardianship of this ancient wood, and perhaps that's as it should be. Funny how things go, isn't it? A town this small, Elksford, West Virginia, population 2,400, never really gets much action. You'd think that being a cop here would be a cushy job. Write the occasional ticket, maybe deal with a domestic dispute, break up high school parties where the kids sneak beer into the woods. That was it. Simple stuff. Name's Michael Reynolds, I'd usually tell people. Most call me Mike, and if you're not in trouble, you probably don't know who I am. I've been with the Elksford Police Department for 12 years now. Not exactly what I dreamed of as a kid, but it pays the bills and keeps me close to my aging mother. The badge gets heavy sometimes, carrying the weight of everyone's expectations in a place where everybody knows your name and your business. Laura 1-1031, January 18th, 1996. Thursday afternoon. I remember the time because I just glanced at my watch, calculating how long I had to finish lunch before my scheduled patrol. Dispatch called me in the middle of lunch, corned beef sandwich from Annie's Diner. Best corned beef in the state, or so she tells everyone. I was about 3 bites in when the radio crackled to life. Officer Reynolds, we got a situation over by Wilson's Field. Something off, might want to check it out. The voice belonged to Rita, our dispatcher for the past 15 years. She wasn't one for dramatics, which made the edge in her voice all the more noticeable. Now Wilson's Field is about 15 minutes from town, up past Old Quarry Road. It's this wide-open area where kids hang out to drink cheap beer and do whatever else teenagers do when they think no one's watching. That day, a couple of them had gone missing. Seemed like something that would resolve itself. Probably they'd wandered off, too drunk to find their way back. Still, you check on things, it's what we do. I wrapped up what remained of my sandwich, ignoring Annie's disapproving stare from behind the counter. She hated when food went to waste, but duty called. The bell above the door jangled as I pushed my way outside into the January chill. The air had that crisp, clean quality that only comes with winter in the mountains. It filled my lungs as I zipped up my jacket and climbed into my cruiser. The drive was uneventful. You could hear the faint hum of the forest, thick trees that felt older than anything else in the town. People say there are spots in those woods that have never been touched by sunlight. Gave me the creeps, but I didn't say that out loud. No cop wants to admit he's afraid of the dark. Old Quarry Road winds through some of the densest parts of the forest, Even at midday, the trees create a canopy that blocks out most of the light. As I drove, I noticed how the temperature seemed to drop with each mile, as if the forest itself was breathing out cold air. The radio had gone silent. Usually Rita would check in every few minutes when I was heading to a call, but not today. I tried not to read too much into it. Reception gets spotty out by Wilson's field anyway. Still, the silence was unnerving. I arrived at the field, parked the cruiser, and immediately saw Old Man Wilson pacing by the gate. His property bordered the field, and he'd named it after himself when he sold a portion to the town decades ago. "Mike," he muttered, his voice shaky. "It ain't right. Ain't right at all." Wilson was in his 70s, a gaunt figure with skin that hung loose on his frame. His eyes darted nervously between me and the tree line as if expecting something to emerge at any moment. "Calm down," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What's not right?" "Kid's been screaming last night, screaming like I ain't ever heard." I wasn't sure what to make of it. Wilson had always been a bit dramatic, prone to exaggeration. He'd call the station about trespassers when deer wandered onto his property. "You hear where it came from?" I asked, scanning the tree line. I noticed how quiet everything was, like the birds had decided to take the day off. The field itself was empty, just tall, brown grass swaying gently in the cold breeze. "Deep, somewhere in there." Wilson pointed toward the woods. "Something bad, I tell you. Something real bad." I glanced around and saw one of the kids' cars still parked by the fence. A blue Honda Civic, mud splashed up the sides. No signs of a struggle. Looked normal enough except for the fact it was abandoned. The driver's side door was closed but unlocked. Inside, I found a half-empty bottle of cheap vodka and some cigarettes. Typical teenager stuff. "Parents reported Jason Collins and Cassie Miller missing this morning," I said, more to myself than to Wilson. "Said they were supposed to be home by midnight." "That's Jason's car," Wilson confirmed, wringing his hands. "Good kid. Works summers at the hardware store." I nodded, reaching into my cruiser for my flashlight. It was still daylight, but I knew those woods got dark fast. The metal handle felt cool in my palm as I checked that it worked. "I'm going to take a look around. You should head back to your house." Wilson shook his head. "Ain't letting you go in there alone. Been living next to these woods 62 years. Know 'em better than anyone." I couldn't argue with that logic. And truth be told, I wasn't eager to head into the trees by myself. There was something about the silence that put me on edge, though I'd never admit it. "Stay behind me," I instructed, unholstering my gun and keeping it pointed at the ground. Standard procedure when investigating a missing persons case with potential danger. We crossed the field, our footsteps muffled by the dry grass. The temperature seemed to drop with each step toward the tree line. January in West Virginia is always cold, but this was different. A penetrating chill that seemed to seep through my uniform and into my bones. The border between the field and forest was abrupt. One moment we were in open space, and the next, surrounded by ancient oaks and pines. The light changed immediately, filtered through branches to create dappled patterns on the forest floor. What struck me most was the silence. Forests are supposed to be alive with sound. Birds, insects, the rustle of small animals. But here, there was nothing. "Where did you hear the screaming?" I asked Wilson, keeping my voice low. He pointed deeper into the trees. "That way. Quarter mile, maybe more." We followed a faint trail, likely made by teenagers sneaking into the woods for privacy. Beer cans and cigarette butts littered the ground, confirming my suspicions. The path was narrow, forcing us to walk single file. I took the lead, my right hand hovering near my holster. After about 10 minutes of walking, the trail widened into a small clearing, and that's when I noticed something off. The ground was disturbed, the earth soft and churned up like someone had been digging or dragging something heavy. The leaf litter was displaced, revealing dark soil underneath. "What do you make of this?" I asked Wilson, who had gone pale beside me. Before he could answer, I saw it, a smear of dark red across a fallen log at the edge of the clearing leading deeper into the woods. Even in the dim light, there was no mistaking it for anything other than blood. "Jesus," I whispered, immediately regretting the outburst when I saw Wilson flinch. The severity of the situation hit me all at once. This wasn't just some kids who'd wandered off drunk. Something was very wrong here. I pulled out my radio to call for backup, but all I got was static. We were too deep in the woods for a signal. We should go back, Wilson suggested, his voice barely audible. Get more people. He was right, of course. Protocol dictated that I should return to my vehicle and call for assistance. But something kept me rooted to the spot, a mixture of duty and a growing sense of urgency. If Jason and Cassie were out here, injured and bleeding, they might not have time for me to go back. You head back, I told Wilson. Tell Sheriff Bryson we need everyone he can spare out here. Wilson looked relieved at the suggestion but hesitated. What about you? I'm going to follow this trail a bit further, see if I can find them. Be careful, Mike, he said, already backing away toward the path we'd followed. Whatever's out there, it ain't natural. I watched him disappear into the trees before turning back to the blood trail. It was fresh, still tacky in places, which meant whatever happened had occurred within the last few hours. Drawing my weapon, I began to follow the crimson path deeper into the woods, unaware that I was walking into the worst day of my life. The blood trail was easy enough to follow, despite the gathering darkness of the forest. Bright red against brown leaves and black soil, it stood out like neon. With each step, the forest grew denser, the trees closer together, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the afternoon sun. The temperature continued to drop, and I could see my breath forming clouds in front of my face. I checked my watch. 01:32 p.m. I'd been in the woods for about 20 minutes. Wilson should be reaching the clearing by now, hopefully on his way to get help. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but the amount of blood I was seeing told me it wasn't good. The trail took a sharp turn to the left, moving away from any established path and into a part of the forest that looked untouched by human presence. No cigarette butts or beer cans here, just undisturbed undergrowth and massive trees whose roots rose from the ground like the gnarled fingers of buried giants. The silence was getting to me. I found myself straining to hear anything. Birds, insects, the wind. But there was nothing except the sound of my own breathing and the soft crunch of leaves beneath my boots. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind, but I pushed those thoughts away. This was real life, not some Hollywood production. As I moved forward, gun drawn and flashlight sweeping the area ahead, I noticed something strange about the blood trail. It wasn't continuous anymore but appeared in splashes and smears, as if whatever was bleeding had been moving erratically, perhaps struggling. In some places, the blood was smeared in long streaks like someone had been dragged. And then I saw it. A shoe. A white Nike sneaker lying on its side about 10 feet ahead of me. As I approached, I could see dark stains around the laces. I recognized it immediately as the kind of shoe popular with teenagers in town. Jason? Cassie? I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet forest. There was no response. Just that oppressive silence pressing in on me from all sides. I continued following the trail, which was becoming more pronounced now. The splashes of blood were larger, pooling in places. Whatever was bleeding was losing a lot of blood. And then I found him, Jason Collins, one of the kids from town. He was lying face up in a small clearing, partially obscured by fallen leaves. His chest had been ripped open, ribs exposed like someone had used a crowbar to peel him apart. The expression on his face, eyes wide open, mouth in a permanent scream, was the kind of thing that doesn't leave your head. I'd seen dead bodies before. Car accidents, hunting mishaps, even a domestic dispute that ended with a shotgun blast. But nothing like this. This wasn't just death, it was violence beyond anything I could comprehend. I felt my stomach churn, acid burning at the back of my throat. Turning away from the body, I emptied the contents of my stomach onto the forest floor, my corned beef sandwich making an unwelcome reappearance. After a few moments, I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and turned back to the body. Training kicked in, pushing through the horror. I knelt beside Jason, careful to avoid the pool of blood surrounding him. He was definitely dead, no pulse to check. His body was still warm though, which meant he hadn't been dead for long. Hours at most. Looking closer at the wounds, I could see that they weren't clean. This wasn't done with a knife or any conventional weapon. The edges of the torn flesh were jagged, almost like bite marks. But what kind of animal could do this to a human chest? I stood up, scanning the area around the body. There were signs of a struggle, Broken branches, disturbed earth, smeared blood, but no indication of what had caused such devastating injuries. Taking out my notebook, I jotted down some observations, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote. The cracking of a branch somewhere behind me made me spin around, gun raised. But there was nothing there, just more trees and shadows. My nerves were getting to me, making me jumpy. I needed to stay focused. I tried the radio again, desperate for backup, but still nothing. Just that same empty static. I was on my own out here, with a dead teenager and God knows what else lurking in the woods. Looking back at Jason's body, I noticed something I'd missed before. A trail leading away from him. Not just blood this time, but broken undergrowth, as if something heavy had been dragged through it. Cassie had to be. Part of me wanted to stay with Jason's body. It felt wrong to leave him there, alone in the forest. But if Cassie was still alive, I needed to find her. With one last look at the dead teenager, I continued following the new trail. The forest was getting darker by the minute, not just because of the time of day, but because I was moving into an area where the trees grew so close together that their branches interlocked overhead, creating a natural tunnel that blocked out most of the light. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom like a knife. The trail was easier to follow now. A clear path of disturbed ground and broken vegetation, punctuated by more blood. Whatever had dragged Cassie wasn't being subtle about it. As I moved deeper into the woods, I became aware of a smell, a fetid, coppery odor that grew stronger with each step. It reminded me of the time I'd helped clean out a freezer that had lost power during a summer heat wave, filled with meat that had rotted in the heat. But this was worse, more primal. The smell led me to another clearing, smaller than the first. And there, propped against a tree trunk like a discarded doll, was Cassie Miller. She was in a worse state than Jason. It looked like something had feasted on her. Large chunks of flesh missing from her arms and legs, her abdomen torn open to expose internal organs. Her face was mercifully intact, though frozen in an expression of pure terror. I forced myself not to retch, even though it felt like bile was creeping up my throat. Cassie had been a good kid, top of her class, always polite when you saw her around town. She'd babysit for my sister's kids sometimes, and now here she was, reduced to meat. Kneeling beside her body, I noticed something odd. Unlike Jason, Cassie's wounds showed signs of deliberateness. The flesh hadn't just been ripped away, it had been removed in specific patterns, almost like someone was experimenting. The thought sent a chill down my spine. I was so focused on examining the body that I almost missed the sound. A soft, wet noise coming from somewhere behind me. Slowly I turned, my flashlight beam sweeping across the clearing until it landed on something that stopped my heart for a beat. A footprint. Not human, not any animal I recognized. It was large, about twice the size of my hand, with what looked like 3 elongated toes and deep imprints in the soft earth suggesting considerable weight. And it was fresh. The edges still crisp. The trail of blood continued deeper into the woods. Part of me wanted to turn back, pretend I didn't see any of this. But I couldn't walk away. Not when it was my job to protect people. Not when something that could do this to 2 teenagers was still out there. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The smell was getting stronger, making it hard to think clearly. With my gun in one hand and flashlight in the other, I continued following the trail. Each step taking me further from safety and deeper into whatever nightmare was unfolding in these woods. The forest had fallen completely silent again. Not even the sound of my footsteps seemed to register in the thick, still air. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong in these woods. A wet, slurping noise, followed by a crunch that I immediately recognized as the sound of bones breaking. It was coming from up ahead, beyond a thick cluster of trees. I slowed my pace, moving as quietly as possible now. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure whatever was making that noise would hear it. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cold, trickling down into my eyes and making them sting. Carefully, I positioned myself behind a large oak tree, peering around it toward the source of the sound. What I saw in the beam of my flashlight would haunt me for the rest of my days. At first glance, I thought it was a bear. Huge, hunched over, its back rising and falling with each deep breath. The creature was partially obscured by undergrowth, but I could make out a massive form covered in what looked like gray, leathery skin. It was bent over something on the ground, something red and wet that I realized with horror must be parts of Jason or Cassie. I stood frozen, afraid that the slightest movement would alert it to my presence. The creature continued its meal, oblivious to my flashlight beam or too focused on feeding to care. I could hear the wet sounds of flesh tearing, the crack of bones being crushed between powerful jaws. Slowly, carefully, I began to back away. One step, then another. My foot landed on a dry branch which snapped with a crack that seemed as loud as a gunshot in the silent forest. The creature stopped feeding. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, with a deliberate slowness that was somehow more terrifying than any sudden movement would have been, it turned to face me. As it turned, I knew this thing wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. It stood on two legs, its skin a sickly gray stretched tight over long, twisted limbs. It had a head that vaguely resembled a deer but without any fur, just raw, mottled flesh. Its eyes, if you could call them that, were black, reflective surfaces that caught the beam of my flashlight and sent it back distorted. Its mouth was the worst part. A wide, lipless gash filled with teeth that were too numerous and too sharp for any natural creature. Some of those teeth were stained red with fresh blood, pieces of flesh caught between them. I froze. It moved slow at first, as if it didn't care that I was there, but then it crouched. Those black eyes fixed on me like I was next on the menu. "Hey, pal." "Not today," I muttered, pointing my gun at it. My hands were shaking so badly I wasn't sure I could hit it, but I squeezed the trigger anyway. The shot echoed through the forest, impossibly loud after so much silence. The creature didn't flinch. It just kept staring, head tilted slightly as if curious about the noise. I fired again. Same result. The bullet seemed to have no effect, either missing entirely due to my shaking hands or, worse, hitting but causing no damage. My heart sank as the thing began moving toward me, faster now. Its movements were jerky, almost insectile, limbs bending at angles that shouldn't be possible. Whatever this was, bullets weren't going to do the trick. I turned and ran. I know people always say running makes things worse, but trust me, standing there wasn't going to be any better. The thing was fast, faster than any human. I could hear it behind me, its breath loud, wet, disgusting. Trees whipped past me as I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. The forest seemed to be working against me. Branches reaching out to snag my clothing, roots rising up to trip me. I had no idea if I was heading in the right direction. All I knew was that I needed to get away from that thing. I could feel it gaining on me, the sound of its breathing getting louder. There was an intelligence in those eyes that terrified me more than its appearance. This wasn't just some wild animal acting on instinct. It was hunting me. A branch caught me across the face, drawing blood. I stumbled but managed to keep moving. The taste of copper filled my mouth as I gasped for air, lungs burning with exertion. Through the trees ahead I could see a faint lightening, the edge of the forest. The clearing was close. If I could just reach my cruiser. Something brushed against my back. A claw or a hand, I couldn't tell. I put on a final burst of speed, fueled by pure terror. I burst out of the tree line into Wilson's field, the sudden openness almost disorienting after the claustrophobic density of the forest. Wilson was still there by the gate, wide-eyed, too scared to move. "Get to the truck," I shouted, not slowing down. I couldn't afford to look back, to see if the creature had followed me into the open. All I knew was the raw animal fear pushing me forward. I reached the cruiser, fumbling with the keys. My hands were slick with sweat and blood from where the branch had cut me. The metal keys kept slipping through my fingers as I tried to find the right one. Behind me, I could hear something moving through the tall grass of the field. Heavy footsteps, getting closer. Finally, the key slid into the lock. I wrenched the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut just as the creature reached the car. For a moment we were face to face, separated only by the glass of the window. Its claws, long, curved things that looked more like black talons than anything that should exist in nature, scraped against the metal of the door with a sound that set my teeth on edge. For a split second we locked eyes, if you could even call those things eyes. Something in that moment told me this wasn't just some wild animal. This thing was aware, it had intent, There was malice in those black, reflective surfaces, a calculated hatred that no natural creature could possess. I gunned the engine, the cruiser roared to life, and I floored it. The creature tried keeping pace, running alongside the vehicle for several yards, one clawed hand still scraping along the side, leaving deep gouges in the paint. But soon I was speeding down the road, leaving it behind in the dust. In my rearview mirror, I could see it standing at the edge of the field, watching me go. It made no attempt to pursue, almost as if it knew there would be another chance. The drive back to town felt like a blur. My hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel, and each breath came in short, painful gasps. The cruiser's heater was on full blast, but I couldn't stop shivering. My mind kept replaying what I'd seen: Jason's body with its chest torn open, Cassie partially devoured, the creature with its too many teeth and wrong-angled limbs. None of it made sense. Nothing like this was supposed to exist in the real world. As the first buildings of Elksford came into view, I felt a momentary sense of relief. Civilization, people, safety. But then a terrible thought struck me. What if the creature followed me back? What if it was even now making its way toward town, toward all these unsuspecting people? No, it had stayed at the edge of the field. It hadn't pursued me once I was in the car. Whatever territory it claimed, the town wasn't part of it. At least, that's what I told myself. When I got back to the station, I was a mess. Sweaty, blood on my uniform, not mine, thank God, and with a wild look in my eyes that made Rita take a step back when I burst through the door. "Mike? What happened to you?" she asked, reaching for the phone. "Should I call Doc Pemberton?" I shook my head, trying to find words that would make sense. "How do you explain something like this?" "Get Sheriff Bryson," I managed to say, "and call the state police. We need search parties in the woods by Wilson's Field. 2 dead kids out there." Rita's face paled, but she nodded and picked up the phone. I collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline that had kept me going finally starting to wear off. Every muscle in my body ached, and the cut on my face had started to throb. Sheriff Bryson emerged from his office, a cup of coffee in one hand and a look of concern on his face. "Reynolds, what the hell happened to you?" I tried to explain what I'd found: the blood trail, the bodies, the creature. But as the words came out, I could see the disbelief growing in Bryson's eyes. It sounded crazy even to me, and I'd seen it with my own eyes. "Wild animal," he said when I'd finished. "A mountain lion or something." "Mountain lions don't do that," I told him, frustration rising in my voice. "They don't tear people open and eat parts of them, and they sure as hell don't walk on 2 legs or have skin like that." Bryson exchanged a look with Rita, the kind of look people give when they think someone's lost their mind. "You've had a shock, Mike. Why don't you let Doc Pemberton take a look at that cut and we'll get a search party together for those kids?" I wanted to argue, to make him understand what was out there. But exhaustion was settling over me like a heavy blanket. What good would it do anyway? No one would believe me without seeing it themselves, and I wasn't sure I wanted anyone else to have to see that thing. So I nodded, letting Rita lead me to the small first aid room at the back of the station. As she cleaned the cut on my face, I stared at the wall, seeing not the faded beige paint but those black, reflective eyes staring back at me. Whatever that thing was, it was still out there in the woods, and I had a feeling this wasn't over. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity and disbelief. Sheriff Bryson organized a search party, 3 deputies and a handful of volunteers to go back into the woods. I wanted to go with them, to show them exactly where the bodies were, but Bryson insisted I stay behind, said I needed rest, but I could see in his eyes that he thought I was unstable, that my story of a monster in the woods was the product of shock or worse. So I sat in the station, drinking coffee that tasted like ash in my mouth, waiting for news. Wilson had corroborated part of my story, the blood, my panic as I ran from the woods, but he hadn't seen the creature. No one had but me. The search party found the bodies exactly where I'd said they would be. Jason Collins with his chest torn open, Cassie Miller partially devoured. They brought them back in body bags, loading them into the county coroner's van with grim expressions that told me they'd seen the same horror I had. But they didn't find any monster. "Looks like a bear attack," Deputy Klein told me when they returned. A big one, judging by the tracks. Bear tracks? I asked, incredulous. What I saw wasn't a bear. Klein shrugged, uncomfortable with my intensity. Whatever it was, it's gone now. We combed those woods pretty thoroughly. I wanted to laugh. They thought they could find that thing if it didn't want to be found? They had no idea what they were dealing with. The official report listed the cause of death as animal attack. Probably a bear or mountain lion. Case closed. The bodies of Todd and Jenny were prepared for burial. Their families left with more questions than answers. I went home that night to an empty apartment, the events of the day playing on repeat in my mind. Sleep was out of the question. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that creature's face, those teeth, the way it moved with such unnatural speed. I sat on my couch until dawn, my service weapon on the coffee table in front of me. Not that it would do any good if that thing decided to come for me. The bullets hadn't even slowed it down. The town held a joint funeral for Jason and Cassie 3 days later. Nearly everyone in Elksford attended, the high school gym packed with mourners dressed in black. I stood at the back, unable to look at the closed caskets at the front of the room. I knew what was inside them. People avoided me at the service. Word had gotten around about my breakdown, about my insistence that something unnatural had killed those kids. In a small town like Elksford, rumors spread faster than wildfire. After the funeral, I went back to work. What else could I do? But things had changed. The other officers treated me differently. Careful, like I might snap at any moment. Sheriff Bryson kept me on desk duty, away from the public. I didn't fight it. Part of me was relieved not to have to go back into those woods, but at night, alone in my apartment, the doubts crept in. Had I really seen what I thought I saw? Could it have been shock, or some kind of hallucination brought on by stress? The rational part of my mind wanted to believe that, wanted to find a logical explanation for what had happened in those woods, but then I'd remember those eyes, that intelligence, and I knew what I'd seen was real. A week after the incident, as people had taken to calling it, Sheriff Bryson called me into his office. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from dealing with a tragedy no one fully understands. "How are you holding up, Mike?" he asked as I took a seat across from his desk. "Fine," I lied. I hadn't had a full night's sleep since it happened, jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking the locks on my doors and windows. Bryson nodded, though we both knew it wasn't true. "Look, I've been thinking, maybe you should take some time off, paid leave, just until things settle down a bit." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order dressed up to sound like concern. They wanted me gone, away from the station where my wild stories might cause problems. "And if I don't want to take leave?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Bryson sighed, rubbing his temples. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mike. You've been through a trauma. No one's saying you haven't. But these stories about some kind of monster, they're not helping anyone. They're certainly not helping you." I wanted to argue, to make him understand what was out there. But what was the point? Without evidence, without someone else who had seen it, my words were just that. Words. So I nodded, accepted the leave, and walked out of the station, feeling the eyes of my colleagues on my back as I went. I was on my own with this, just like I had been in those woods. The days stretched into weeks. I spent most of my time at home, researching anything that might help me understand what I'd seen. Local legends, cryptozoology, unexplained disappearances in the area, anything that might give me a clue. But there was nothing concrete, nothing that matched the creature I'd encountered. I did find one thing, though, a series of newspaper articles from 1952 about 3 hunters who went missing in the woods near Wilson's Field. Their bodies were found 2 weeks later, severely mutilated according to the reports. The case was never solved, eventually attributed to a bear attack, just like Jason and Cassie. The similarity was too much to be coincidence. Whatever that thing was, it had been in these woods for a long time. 1 month after my encounter, I received a visitor. Wilson, the old man who owned the field, showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking even more haggard than usual. "We need to talk," he said, his voice lower than I remembered, his eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. I led him inside, curious but wary. I hadn't spoken to anyone from town in weeks, choosing isolation over the sideways glances and whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. Wilson sat on my couch, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I didn't tell you everything that day," he began, not meeting my eyes. "About what I heard the night those kids disappeared." I felt a chill run through me. "What do you mean?" "The screaming, it wasn't just screaming, there were words mixed in. Begging. One of them, the boy, I think, he kept saying, 'It's watching us.'" Wilson swallowed hard. "And then there was the other sound." "What other sound?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "Like nothing I've ever heard before. Not animal, not human. A kind of chittering noise, but deeper, like it was coming from something big." Wilson finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a fear I recognized all too well. "You saw it, didn't you? The thing that made that sound?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw it." Relief flooded his face, as if hearing someone else acknowledge what he'd experienced lifted a weight from his shoulders. "It's happened before, you know. Every 40 or 50 years, people go missing in those woods. My grandfather used to talk about it, said there was something living out there, something old." "Why didn't you tell anyone else?" I asked. Wilson let out a bitter laugh. "Who would believe me? An old man talking about monsters in the woods. They'd have me committed faster than you can say senile." He paused, studying my face. "They didn't believe you either, did they?" "No," I admitted. "They think it was a bear or a mountain lion." Wilson shook his head, disgust clear on his face. "People see what they want to see. They can't handle the truth, that there are things in this world that don't fit into their neat little boxes." We talked for hours after that, Wilson sharing stories his grandfather had told him, me recounting every detail of my encounter with the creature. It felt good to finally talk to someone who didn't think I was crazy, who understood that what I'd seen was real. Before he left, Wilson placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong for a man his age. "Be careful, Mike, it knows who you are now. It saw you just like you saw it. And I don't think it likes being seen." His words stayed with me long after he'd gone, echoing in my mind as I tried and failed to sleep that night. The creature had seen me, had looked into my eyes with an intelligence that no animal should possess, and now it knew me. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it lit a fire inside me. I couldn't let this go, couldn't pretend it hadn't happened like the rest of the town seemed determined to do. 2 kids were dead, torn apart by something that shouldn't exist, and no one was doing anything about it. If no one else would face the truth, then it was up to me. The next morning I started planning. I would need supplies, better weapons since my gun had proved useless, camping gear, food, and water. I would go back into those woods, find that creature, and document it somehow. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that the thing I'd seen was real. It was a suicide mission. Part of me knew that. But what choice did I have? I couldn't live with the knowledge that something was out there, hunting in those woods, while the town went about its business oblivious to the danger. As I made my preparations, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since that day, I had a purpose, a direction. The fear was still there, a cold knot in the pit of my stomach, but it no longer paralyzed me. I would go back to Wilson's field. I would find that creature. And this time, I would be ready for it. 3 months after my encounter with the creature, I returned to Wilson's field. The winter had given way to spring, the barren trees now showing the first buds of new growth. It should have been beautiful, a reminder of life's persistence. But all I could see was a vast hunting ground for the thing that lurked in these woods. I'd chosen my time carefully, midday when the sun was at its highest. If that thing preferred darkness, as I suspected it did, I wanted every advantage I could get. My truck was parked at the edge of the field, loaded with the supplies I'd gathered over the past weeks. Not just camping gear and food, but weapons, a shotgun, a hunting rifle, even a machete. I didn't know what would hurt this creature, but I was determined to find out. Wilson met me as arranged, his face grim but resolved. He'd insisted on coming with me, despite my protests. "This is my land," he'd said, "and I've been running from what's in those woods my whole life. I'm too old to keep running." We stood at the edge of the field, looking toward the tree line where I'd emerged in panic 3 months earlier. The woods seemed peaceful in the spring sunlight, birds singing, a gentle breeze rustling the new leaves. It was hard to believe that something monstrous lurked within. "You remember where you found the bodies?" Wilson asked, adjusting the straps of his backpack. I nodded. The locations were seared into my memory. About a mile in, maybe a little more. There's a clearing where I found Jason, then another small one further on where Cassie was. And the creature? Beyond that. Deeper in the woods where the trees get real thick. Wilson took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Well, no sense in putting it off. We set off across the field, each step taking us closer to the darkness beneath the trees. I couldn't help but remember my frantic escape, running for my life with that thing close behind me. Now I was willingly going back. The temperature dropped as we entered the forest, just as it had before. The birdsong faded, replaced by that unnatural silence that had so unnerved me on my first visit. Wilson noticed it too, his head turning as if searching for sounds that should have been there. "It's too quiet," he whispered. I nodded, keeping my shotgun ready. It was like this last time. Like the whole forest is holding its breath. We followed the same faint trail I'd taken before, now partially overgrown with spring vegetation. The undergrowth was thicker than it had been in winter, making progress slower. Every few yards I would stop and listen, trying to detect any sound that might indicate we weren't alone. After about 20 minutes of walking, we reached the first clearing. There was no sign now of what had happened here. No blood, no disturbed earth. Nature had reclaimed the space, erasing the violence that had occurred. "This is where I found Jason," I said, my voice hushed despite the lack of immediate danger. "He was right there by that fallen log." Wilson nodded, his eyes scanning the ground as if expecting to find evidence that had been missed. "And the girl was further in?" "Yeah, there was a trail leading from here to where she was. Like something had dragged her." We continued on, following the path I remembered. The forest grew denser as we went, the canopy overhead blocking more and more of the sunlight. Despite it being midday, it felt like dusk beneath the trees. The second clearing looked different than I remembered. The tree against which Cassie's body had been propped was gone, leaving only a stump. The ground around it had been disturbed, the earth churned up and then smoothed over, as if something had been digging. "This isn't right," I muttered, approaching the stump cautiously. The tree was here, a big oak. Wilson came up beside me, his brow furrowed. "Looks like it was cut down. Recently too, judging by how fresh the stump is." I knelt down, examining the stump more closely. The cut was clean, too clean for natural causes. Someone came back here and removed it. But why? Wilson didn't answer, his attention caught by something else. He moved a few yards away, bending down to look at something on the ground. "Mike, you need to see this." I joined him, following his gaze to what looked like a series of marks scratched into a flat rock. They weren't random. They had a deliberate pattern to them, almost like symbols or primitive writing. "What is this?" I asked, tracing one of the marks with my finger. It was deeply etched into the stone, the edges sharp as if recently made. "I don't know," Wilson replied, his voice tight with tension. "But I don't like it. It feels wrong." He was right. There was something unsettling about the symbols, a sense of alien intelligence behind them. I took out my camera, an old Polaroid I'd brought to document anything we found, and snapped a picture of the markings. "Let's keep moving," I suggested, suddenly eager to be away from this place. If the creature followed the same pattern as before, it would have taken parts of the bodies deeper into the woods. Wilson nodded, straightening up. "Lead the way." We pressed on, now moving beyond where I'd gone on my first visit. The forest continued to darken around us, the trees growing closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to create a natural tunnel that blocked out most of the light. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam barely penetrating the gloom. The silence was complete now. Not even the sound of our footsteps seemed to register in the thick, still air. It was as if we were walking through a void, a place where normal rules of sound and light didn't apply. And then we both heard it. A soft, wet noise coming from somewhere ahead of us. It was the same sound I'd heard before, the sound of the creature feeding. Wilson and I exchanged a glance. No words needed. We both knew what that sound meant. Slowly we approached, moving as quietly as possible. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would give us away. the adrenaline making my hands shake despite my determination. We came to another clearing, larger than the previous ones. And there, in the center, was a sight that made my blood run cold. It wasn't the creature. It was what remained of it. The thing that had killed Jason and Cassie, the monster that had chased me through these woods, was spread out on the ground in pieces. Its gray, leathery skin had been peeled back to expose what looked like internal organs, though they were unlike any I'd seen before. Strange, pulsating structures in colors that shouldn't exist in nature. The head, with its deer-like shape and too many teeth, had been separated from the body and placed on a crude altar of stacked stones. The black, reflective eyes were dull now, no longer containing that malevolent intelligence I'd seen before, and standing over the dissected creature was something else. Something worse. At first I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. It had a human shape, more or less, but there was something fundamentally wrong about its proportions. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at impossible angles. Its skin, if you could call it that, seemed to shift and ripple, changing texture and color like oil on water. It was holding something in what I assumed were its hands, a long curved implement that gleamed wetly in the dim light. It was using this tool to methodically cut into the dead creature's body, removing pieces and placing them in neat rows on the ground beside it. Wilson made a small noise beside me, a barely audible gasp of horror. But in the unnatural silence of the forest, it might as well have been a shout. The thing stopped its work. Slowly, with a deliberateness that sent ice through my veins, it turned toward us. I couldn't see its face, if it had one. Where a face should have been was just a smooth, blank surface reflecting the beam of my flashlight. But somehow I knew it was looking at us, aware of our presence. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, the thing began to change. Its form rippled and shifted. The blank space where its face should have been beginning to develop features, eyes, a nose, a mouth that looked almost human, almost, but not quite, like a child's crude attempt to draw a person. It took a step toward us, the movement too fluid, too smooth to be natural. The implement it held dripped with dark fluid that sizzled when it hit the ground. "Run," Wilson whispered, his voice barely audible. "For God's sake, run." But I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, transfixed by the horror in front of me. This wasn't what I'd expected to find. The creature I'd encountered, as terrifying as it had been, was just a predator, an animal. But this was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist in any rational universe. The thing took another step toward us, and suddenly I could move again. I raised my shotgun, aiming at what passed for its chest, and pulled the trigger. The blast shattered the silence, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet forest. The creature staggered back, a hole appearing in its shifting form. But instead of blood or gore, the wound seemed to close almost immediately, the shifting surface of its body simply flowing back together. "It doesn't hurt it," I shouted to Wilson, already turning to run. "Nothing hurts it." We fled, crashing through the undergrowth with no attempt at stealth now. Behind us I could hear movement, not the sound of footsteps, but something like liquid flowing rapidly over solid ground. The forest seemed to close in around us, branches reaching out to snag our clothing, roots rising up to trip us. It was as if the woods themselves were working with the creature, trying to slow our escape. I glanced back once and immediately wished I hadn't. The thing was gaining on us, its form changing as it moved, becoming more streamlined, more predatory. The almost human face it had formed was gone, replaced by something that resembled a gaping maw filled with teeth that constantly shifted and rearranged themselves. Wilson stumbled beside me, his foot caught in a tangle of roots. I grabbed his arm, hauling him up, but the delay cost us precious seconds. The creature was closer now, close enough that I could feel a cold emanating from it, a chill that went beyond physical temperature. "We're not going to make it," Wilson gasped, his breath coming in ragged pants. "It's too fast." He was right. At the rate the thing was gaining on us, it would catch us long before we reached the edge of the forest. But I refused to give up, refused to die in these dark woods like Jason and Cassie. "The camera?" I said suddenly, an idea forming. "The flash." I fumbled in my pocket for the Polaroid, nearly dropping it in my haste. The creature was mere yards behind us now, its form rippling with anticipation. Turning, I raised the camera and pressed the shutter button. The flash fired, a sudden burst of bright light in the gloom of the forest. The effect on the creature was immediate and dramatic. It recoiled from the light with a noise that defied description, not a scream or a roar, but something between a high-pitched whine and the sound of radio static. Its form seemed to destabilize, the shifting surface becoming more erratic, less controlled. "It doesn't like light," I shouted to Wilson. "Keep running, we need to get to the clearing." We pushed on, my legs burning with exertion, lungs heaving as I gasped for breath. Every few yards I would turn and fire the camera again, the flash buying us a few precious seconds as the creature recoiled from the light. The trees began to thin out ahead of us, suggesting we were nearing the edge of the forest. I could see daylight through the branches, the open space of Wilson's field beyond. With a final burst of speed, we broke through the tree line into the field. The sudden brightness was almost shocking after the gloom of the forest. I turned, expecting to see the creature right behind us, but there was nothing there. Just the dark shadow of the woods, silent and still. Wilson collapsed onto the grass, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. I remained standing, gun trained on the tree line, waiting for the creature to emerge, but it didn't. Whatever that thing was, it seemed unwilling or unable to leave the darkness of the forest. What the hell was that? Wilson gasped between breaths. I shook my head, unable to find words that could adequately describe what we'd seen. "I don't know, but it killed the creature I saw before, the one that killed those kids." Wilson nodded, his face ashen. "It was studying it, taking it apart piece by piece. The implications of that were too horrifying to contemplate. If the deer-headed creature that had killed Jason and Cassie was just an animal, a predator doing what predators do, then what was the thing that had killed it? What kind of intelligence would dissect another creature with such methodical precision? We made our way back to my truck in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. The camera hung heavy in my pocket, containing the only evidence of what we'd seen. Images that I wasn't sure I wanted to develop. As we drove away from Wilson's field, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had glimpsed something we weren't meant to see. A corner of reality that should have remained hidden. A truth too vast and terrible for human minds to comprehend. The town moved on as small towns do, pretending it didn't happen. The deaths of Jason and Cassie were filed away as animal attacks, tragic but explainable. Life returned to normal, or a semblance of it, but Wilson knew. He saw it too, and I still see it even now when I close my eyes. Whatever that thing was, it's still out there in the woods, waiting for someone else to wander too far from town. Maybe next time they won't be so lucky. Funny thing about that day, I never did finish my sandwich. The trail ahead disappeared into dense forest as I adjusted my backpack straps. 3 days of solitude in the Cascade Wilderness, exactly what I needed after months of grinding office work. My research had been thorough, maps downloaded, routes marked, emergency contacts informed of my itinerary. I'd been backpacking since college, but this would be my first solo multi-day trek. "Last chance to back out," said the park ranger at the trailhead station, stamping my wilderness permit. "Weather report shows storms might roll in earlier than expected." "I've got gear for it," I replied, showing him my waterproof pack cover and rain shell. He nodded, unimpressed. "Just stick to your filed route. We've had 3 rescue operations this month already." He hesitated before adding, "And watch yourself after dark. Lots of wildlife activity lately." The first 5 miles felt glorious. Nothing but bird calls and the rhythm of my boots against earth. The September air carried that perfect crispness, not yet winter's bite but past summer's oppressive heat. By mid-afternoon I'd reached the first landmark on my map. Granite Ridge Overlook. Setting down my pack, I pulled out binoculars to survey the valley below. That's when I noticed the smoke, a thin gray plume rising about 2 miles east of my position. Strange, this area required fire permits, and none had been issued according to the ranger station's board. Through my binoculars I could make out what appeared to be a small campsite, though too distant to see clearly. Probably just day hikers being irresponsible. I marked it mentally, If I crossed paths with a ranger, I'd mention it. As dusk approached, I made camp near a stream in a small clearing. Standard procedure: tent positioned on level ground, food hung from a tree branch away from my sleeping area, bear spray within reach. I cooked a simple meal of dehydrated stew on my pocket stove and watched darkness claim the forest. The first unusual thing happened as I was cleaning my cookware. A distinct crack of a branch breaking, too heavy for a squirrel, too deliberate for natural wood settling. I switched on my headlamp, sweeping the beam across the tree line. "Hello?" I called. "Someone there?" Nothing. Just the wind rustling leaves and distant owl calls. I finished securing my camp and crawled into my tent, exhaustion from the day's hike quickly pulling me towards sleep. Just before drifting off, my consciousness snagged on a detail. The forest had gone completely silent. No insects chirping, no nocturnal rustling, nothing. At 2:17 a.m., according to my watch, I jerked awake. Something had changed in the ambient sounds. I lay motionless, listening. Footsteps. Slow, methodical, circling my campsite. Not an animal. The gait was bipedal, distinctly human. But something wasn't right about the rhythm. Each step lingered too long, as if whoever, whatever, was out there was deliberately taking their time, measuring each placement. I reached for my flashlight but stopped myself. Better not to reveal I was awake. The footsteps continued their circuit, occasionally pausing. Then came a sound that turned my skin to ice, sniffing, loud, exaggerated inhalations, like something was sampling the air, tracking a scent. My tent walls suddenly seemed absurdly thin, offering nothing but the illusion of separation between me and whatever circled outside. The footsteps eventually receded, but sleep remained impossible. I clutched my hunting knife until dawn finally broke. In morning light, I searched the perimeter of my camp. The ground was still damp from overnight condensation, yet I found no footprints, no disturbance in the soil or vegetation. I might have dismissed it as a dream, except for one detail. My backpack, which I'd left under the rainfly but outside my tent, had been moved about 3 feet, and the zipper on the outer pocket was open. Nothing appeared to be missing, but the implications made my stomach tighten. Someone had been here while I slept. Someone had touched my belongings. I should turn back, I thought. But the trailhead was a full day's hike behind me, and my planned route would bring me to a ranger outpost by tomorrow afternoon. Better to push forward than retrace my steps. As I shouldered my pack and consulted my map, movement caught my eye across the clearing. Just a flicker of something tan disappearing behind a tree. I froze, staring at the spot, but nothing emerged. "Just a deer," I told myself aloud, needing to hear a human voice, even my own. But I didn't believe it. Deer don't hide behind trees and watch. My second day on the trail began with leaden skies threatening rain. I hiked faster than planned, frequently glancing over my shoulder. The forest felt different now, watchful, somehow. Every shadow among the trees seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. Yet nothing was there when I turned to look directly. Around noon, I stopped at a mountain stream to refill my water bottles. As I crouched by the water's edge, I noticed something downstream that made me halt mid-motion. Footprints in the mud. Human footprints, but oddly shaped, as if the person had been walking on the outer edges of their feet. They approached the water, then simply stopped. No returning tracks, no continuation across the stream. I hurriedly finished filtering my water and continued hiking, unable to shake the prickling sensation between my shoulder blades. The trail grew steeper, switchbacking up a rocky incline. Halfway up, I paused to catch my breath and took out my map. That's when I heard it, a mimicry of my own breathing pattern, coming from the woods below. Inhale, exhale, at exactly my rhythm, but slightly delayed like an echo. Except there shouldn't be any echo here, among the sound-absorbing trees. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly unsteady. The breathing stopped immediately. Then, more disturbing than the mimicry, came a response I wasn't prepared for. My own voice, distorted and hollow, asking, "Who's there?" I nearly lost my footing scrambling up the trail. Logic told me it was another hiker playing tricks, but a deeper instinct screamed otherwise. I hiked without rest for the next 3 hours, pushing my pace until my legs burned. Late afternoon brought the promised rain. First as scattered drops, then a steady downpour that forced me to make camp earlier than planned. I found a sheltered spot beneath a rocky overhang and set up my tent with fumbling, rain-slick fingers. Inside my tent, I crossed off another day on my map. The ranger outpost should be just 4 miles ahead. I could reach it before noon tomorrow, if the weather cleared. I ate a cold dinner, not wanting to exit my tent to cook. As darkness fell, the rain intensified, drumming against my tent fly. I was grateful for the noise. It would mask any sounds of approach. Less comforting was the realization that it would also drown out any warning I might otherwise hear. I placed my knife and flashlight beside my sleeping bag, then dug into my pack for my emergency satellite messenger. The device showed no signal, which was unusual given the relatively open area I'd chosen. I'd try again in the morning from higher ground. Despite my exhaustion, I fought against sleep, listening to rain pounding the tent. Around midnight the downpour suddenly lessened, and in that moment of relative quiet I heard it, scratching. Gentle at first, then more insistent. Something was running its fingers or claws down the outside of my tent. I lay paralyzed, watching as the nylon wall of my tent indented slightly with each downward stroke. The scratching moved methodically around the perimeter, testing, probing. I clutched my knife with white knuckles, my breath shallow and silent. Then came a pressure against the tent wall near my feet. Something leaning against it, pressing inward. The fabric bulged with increasing weight. I kicked hard at the spot, connecting with something solid that immediately withdrew. A sound followed that I struggle even now to describe. A dry, rattling inhale followed by what might have been words, but in no language I recognized. The pressure disappeared from my tent and I heard receding footsteps. For hours I sat upright in my sleeping bag, knife in hand, listening to the rain return to its heavy cadence. When my watch showed 4 a.m., I heard a distant scream, not quite human, not quite animal, echoing from the direction I'd come from earlier that day. Dawn couldn't arrive fast enough. When first light finally seeped through the tent walls, I packed with record speed, my fingers clumsy with cold and residual fear. Outside, I found what I'd been both expecting and dreading. My tent was surrounded by footprints in the mud, circling the entire perimeter. Like the tracks by the stream, they walked on the outer edges of the feet, with toes that seemed slightly too long. More disturbing was what I found hanging from a tree branch 10 feet from my tent. My own bandana, which had been in my pack's outer pocket, now tied in an intricate knot I didn't recognize. I left it hanging there, grabbed my gear, and hit the trail at a near run. The third day dawned with fog so thick I could barely see 20 feet ahead. My planned 4-mile hike to the ranger outpost suddenly seemed much more daunting. The trail conditions had deteriorated after the night's heavy rain, with sections washed out and others transformed into slick mud channels. My satellite messenger still showed no signal, which made no sense in this terrain. I resorted to using my compass and map exclusively, carefully measuring my progress against landmarks I could barely discern through the mist. Around 10 a.m. I stopped dead in my tracks. Ahead on the trail, partially obscured by fog, stood a figure. It was roughly human-shaped but oddly proportioned. Too tall, too thin, with arms that seemed to hang below where knees should be. I blinked hard, and when I looked again, the trail was empty. "It's just the fog playing tricks," I whispered. But my pace slowed, each step now deliberate and cautious. An hour later, I realized I hadn't seen a trail marker in some time. According to my map, I should have reached a small wooden bridge crossing a ravine, but no such landmark appeared. With growing unease, I acknowledged the possibility I'd strayed from the path. I backtracked to the last point I was certain of my location, a distinctive rock formation I'd passed approximately 40 minutes earlier. It wasn't there. Nothing looked familiar. Somehow, despite following what appeared to be a clear trail, I'd ended up somewhere not represented on my map. As panic threatened to rise, I forced myself through familiar protocols. I checked my compass, identified north, and oriented my map accordingly. The ranger outpost should be northeast of my position. Even if I couldn't find the trail again, I could navigate cross-country in that general direction until I intercepted either the outpost or another marked trail. The fog began to lift slightly around noon, revealing a landscape that sent a chill through me despite the day's growing warmth. I wasn't in the mixed pine forest I'd been hiking through earlier. Instead, I found myself among ancient, moss-draped trees I didn't recognize from any part of the trail I'd studied. The ground was carpeted with ferns that seemed to absorb all sound, creating an unnatural silence. I checked my compass again. The needle spun lazily, settling briefly in one direction before drifting to another. I tapped it, shook it, but the result was the same. The compass was malfunctioning. With no working navigation tools, I chose to follow the slope downhill, reasoning that it would eventually lead to a stream or river that might be on my map. The going was difficult. The ground alternated between slippery stone and treacherous root-tangled earth. By mid-afternoon, the fog had cleared entirely, but my situation hadn't improved. I'd found a stream, but it matched nothing on my map. Worse, I began to notice odd arrangements in the forest around me. Small piles of stones stacked in ways that couldn't be natural. Branches broken and arranged in geometric patterns on the ground. I passed a tree with deep gouges in its trunk, too high for a bear's claw marks, too patterned to be random damage. 5 parallel lines that curled at the ends, repeated 3 times across the trunk. As daylight began to wane, I made a desperate decision to climb to higher ground, hoping to spot the ranger outpost or at least some recognizable landmark before darkness fell. I found a rocky bluff and began to ascend. Halfway up, I heard a sound that stopped me mid-climb. A series of hollow wooden clacks, like sticks being struck together rhythmically. The sound came from multiple directions at once, surrounding me. I looked back the way I'd come and saw movement among the trees. Something bipedal but moving with a lurching, uneven gait, partially concealed by underbrush. I scrambled upward with renewed urgency, no longer caring about proper climbing technique or the safety of my handholds. At the top of the bluff, gasping for breath, I was granted a momentary surge of hope. In the distance, perhaps 2 miles away, I could see what appeared to be a structure with a metal roof reflecting the late afternoon sun. The ranger outpost it had to be, but my relief evaporated as I turned to begin my descent from the opposite side of the bluff. There, at the base of the rocky slope, stood the figure I'd glimpsed earlier in the fog. Now in clear daylight, I could see it wasn't human, at least not entirely. Its proportions were wrong in ways that defied explanation. It wore what appeared to be clothing made of hides, and its face, I looked back on this moment with the most doubt, wondering if fear had distorted my perception. Its face seemed to sit wrongly on its head, as if it were wearing a mask that didn't quite fit. When it moved, the face remained oddly rigid while the head beneath it shifted. It raised one elongated arm and pointed directly at me. That's when I ran, abandoning any thought of retrieving the outpost. I half climbed, half fell down the opposite side of the bluff, then sprinted into the forest, choosing direction based solely on instinct and the desperate need to put distance between myself and that pointing figure. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to buckle. When I finally stopped, disoriented and gasping, the forest had grown dark. I had no idea where I was, and worse, I'd dropped my pack during my frantic descent from the bluff. I had nothing but the clothes I wore, a pocket knife, and a small emergency flashlight. Night in the wilderness, alone and unprepared, with something hunting me. I'd never felt more vulnerable. The 4th night was a haze of terror and exhaustion. Without my gear, I was forced to keep moving despite the darkness. My small emergency flashlight cast weak illumination that seemed to make the shadows deeper rather than dispersing them. Every few minutes I would stop and listen, certain I could hear footsteps matching my pace somewhere in the darkness behind me. Around what must have been midnight, the moon emerged from behind clouds, offering slightly better visibility. I found myself in a small clearing and paused to get my bearings, though bearings had become a meaningless concept. Without my compass or map, I was navigating purely on the hope of finding anything man-made. That's when I noticed them. Arranged in a perfect circle around the clearing's edge were small figures crafted from twigs and bound with what looked like hair. Each was roughly humanoid, with disproportionately long limbs and oversized heads. I'd walked directly into the center of their arrangement without seeing them in the dark. I backed away slowly, then turned to flee, and found my path blocked. The figure from the bluff stood at the clearing's edge, still and silent, its face still wrong in that indefinable way. In the moonlight, I could see details I'd missed before. Its clothes weren't merely animal hides but incorporated fragments of what looked disturbingly like synthetic materials. A strip of blue backpack strap, a piece of orange nylon that could have come from a tent. It tilted its head at an impossible angle, regarding me with eyes that reflected the moonlight like an animal's. Then it spoke, and the sound that emerged was a distorted collage of human voices, as if it were playing back recordings of things it had heard. I recognized one phrase as my own, from when I'd called out, "Hello," at my first campsite. I did the only thing I could think of. I took out my pocket knife, opened the blade, and held it before me. "Stay back," I warned, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure mimicked my posture, raising its hand as if holding an invisible knife. It repeated, "Stay back," in my own voice, but with the inflection all wrong. The syllables stretched and compressed. For a moment, we stood in this bizarre standoff. Then it took a sudden step forward, and I slashed wildly with my knife, connecting with nothing but air. It retreated a step, still mimicking my posture, and made a sound that might have been laughter. That's when I noticed movement at the clearing's edge. More figures, similar to the first but smaller, emerging from between trees. 3, then 5, then too many to count in the dim light. All with the same wrong proportions, the same ill-fitting faces. They began to circle, moving in perfect unison, never taking their reflective eyes off me. The message was clear. I was surrounded, outnumbered, with no escape route. In that moment of absolute despair, my flashlight caught something metallic beyond the trees. Reflective tape on what appeared to be a trail marker. Somehow, in my blind flight through the forest, I'd circled back to a marked trail. I made my decision in an instant. I charged directly at the original figure, knife extended before me. It didn't retreat as expected, but moved to intercept me with unnatural speed. As we collided, I felt a searing pain across my ribs, its own blade which I hadn't seen until too late. The impact knocked us both to the ground. Up close, its face was worse, a patchwork that didn't move correctly with the muscles beneath. I slashed blindly, felt my knife connect with something solid, and heard a high-pitched keening sound that hurt my ears. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the trail marker, expecting to feel hands grabbing at me from behind at any moment. Behind me, the keening sound rose in pitch until it seemed to vibrate the air itself. I reached the marker, found the actual trail beyond it, and ran as I'd never run before. The trail sloped downward, and I followed it recklessly in the dark, stumbling and falling repeatedly but always rising to continue. Dawn found me still on the trail, moving forward on autopilot, clothes torn and bloodied from both the creature's slash and multiple falls. As light grew stronger, I saw footprints on the trail ahead, normal, human boot prints. I followed them like a lifeline. An hour later, I heard the most beautiful sound imaginable, a vehicle engine. I emerged from the forest to find a dirt road and, miracle of miracles, a Forest Service truck parked 50 yards away. A ranger was checking something on a map spread across the hood. He looked up in alarm as I staggered toward him. Probably a terrifying sight with my wild eyes and bloodied clothes. "Jesus," he said, hurrying toward me. "What happened to you?" I collapsed then, the adrenaline that had kept me moving finally depleted. As consciousness faded, I heard him calling for medical assistance on his radio. I woke in a hospital bed. The official report states I was found severely dehydrated, with multiple lacerations including a significant knife wound to my ribs, and suffering from exposure and exhaustion. The Rangers concluded I'd become disoriented after losing my way, and my injuries were attributed to falls and possible self-infliction during a panic response. My pack was never recovered. The section of forest where I encountered the figures doesn't appear on any official trail map I've been able to find since. The ranger outpost I thought I saw from the bluff doesn't exist according to Forest Service records. I've spent months researching what happened to me. Local indigenous legends speak of skinwalkers, beings that can take human form but never quite perfectly. Skeptics suggest I encountered a group of survivalists or possibly people cooking methamphetamine in the remote wilderness who sought to scare me away. All I know for certain is what I saw and experienced. The wound across my ribs healed, leaving a scar unlike any normal knife wound. The doctors noted its unusual pattern and depth. Sometimes at night, I still hear that mimicry of my own voice asking, "Who's there?" And sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I could swear I hear scratching against my bedroom walls.